So this is round 2 of Reinventing TV News. I'm Bob Sasha. I'm a Tao professor here, and I teach this new class called Video Lab, which we're looking at new ways of telling video news. And you might see some of the students from the class running around with iPhones and microphones and uploading little bits all together. But I'm going to be really quick so we can get started here. This is Ido Siegel. He's an entrepreneur, a technologist, a writer, and a founder of Bemuse. And so he's going to do something pretty cool for us.
Thank you. Thanks for having us here today. In the spirit of concision, I have less than 5 minutes to describe the revolution to you. What we want to present to you today is something that we've been working on for the last 3 years. It's a project called TouchCast. It's currently been deployed at places like the BBC. BBC News is using it live as we speak to effectively replace a complete TV truck with an iPad. It's not only allowing you to do more with less, it's also changing the language of how we can communicate with our viewers in a very interesting way. By way of background, I'd like to challenge us that I think the way we're doing things on television is fundamentally broken right now, because we are actually being stinted by a platform which is a one-way communication, and that when we talk to our viewers, they are going off of that view and going to their second screen because they're looking for more information. We're not giving it to them because the platforms are broken. So what we are trying to do with this project is actually break through that wall, and the argument being that this notion of a second screen is just a crutch because our technology is broken, and we now have a first screen that does all of that together. And that's what really we try to accomplish with this platform. And the analogy in terms of a writer or a creator is that if you recall, take yourself back to the day when blogging first showed up and how that changed the dynamic between us and our audience, where suddenly we didn't go through an editorial chain, we can actually communicate directly with the audience. What this platform is doing, and we're seeing that rejuvenation with the people that are leveraging it, is allowing that to happen for people in the category in the context of video, which increasingly is a very important thing for all of us to participate and create in. And the argument I typically make when talking to journalists is journalists are actually much better equipped to do what I'm about to show you than a TV personality, because the depth and the knowledge that you have and the research around every piece and the ability to talk about it lends itself very well to a format that's conversational, when you're really talking to an audience in the same way we now talk on the phone. When we call someone, we say, Google this, Google that, YouTube this, did you hear about that? We talk in URLs in the same way that we write in hyperlinks. What does that look like when it's a video? That's what I want to show you. So we set up this, don't be alarmed by this big stand. This is just my iPad held by this thing called a podcast. It's just a frame to hold it in place. And you can see on the prompter here what I'm seeing on the screen. I've taken a copy of my piece and I've pasted it into the app. And I've set up these elements on the bottom, which I want to discuss as I go through my video. And in the next 90 seconds, I'll produce a segment. There's no post-production involved. As you can see, I'm an army of one. And I can take any piece that I've written and really supersize it in the context of also giving my references and my sources. This piece is not necessarily the most exciting one, but it's just something that happened today. We thought it would be a good context. So I've set this up here on the bottom. Think of it like setting up PowerPoint or Rundown in the context of broadcast. And these things we have on the screen are what we call VAPs, video apps. They're elements that when the viewer touches them are interactive, and I'll show that to you after I complete my recording. So let me start my recording here, and all I'll be doing is clicking the next button as I move through these elements. We also have a remote, so you can do that from afar. You'll notice that behind me, I'm actually positioned inside airport terminal, even though I could be in my underwear in my house. And that's just taking some stock footage and putting it. The iPad also does all the chroma key. And it does it at a pretty good quality, as you can see, in HD. So everything comes out of here as HD, and we can do that. So let's hit this. Some passengers on JetBlue flight in Long Beach, you can see the map right here, got a scare today when one of the engines blew after takeoff. The plane had to do an emergency landing, and luckily nobody was hurt. It's interesting to see that some of this footage was, of course, the demo. Start it again. So you can see how it's set up. So this is my project, so I set up this project in advance. Start from the top. I'll turn on my green screen. And we're back. There we go. Let's try that again. Probably happen again, but we'll try. Turn on my teleprompter. Some passengers of the JetBlue flight in Long Beach, the map right here, got a scare today when one of the engines blew after takeoff. The plane had to do an emergency landing, and luckily, nobody was hurt. In the age of social media, the scene inside the cabin was captured on a cell phone and uploaded to YouTube. You can tap on the video right here to watch this video. The beauty that we can take a primary source and place it straight into our broadcast very easily. You can also see that an actor from the Twilight film, Jackson Rathbone, was on the plane, and he was tweeting live. You can check out his tweets or check out to see what he's tweeting right now, or in general, see what people are saying about JetBlue as a consequence of this affair. A lot of chatter on that. If you want to get a bit more depth on it, you might want to visit this CNN story. As you can see, I'm embedded inside the webpage right now. Check out this page and click on this link. You can check the video, see how the ambulances rush to the plane. And tell us what you think. Would you get on a plane right now, JetBlue, and risk your life or not? Just check out this poll right now. Tell us. So I've clicked on done, and now we've just. Some passengers of the JetBlue flight in Long Beach. So if I touch this as a viewer, if I touch this map, what happens is that is now interactive. You see, I can interact with it with my finger. I can zoom in. I can check the satellite image. If I'm talking about Afghanistan, I can see what's going on there. It's kind of that science fiction vision of this future where if we're telling a story, you can interact with it. These VAFs could also be a PDF report. It could be an earnings call of a 300-page book. You see this video. I want to see this video. I touch it, and I'm seeing that video. This is now that B-roll footage. My video paused, and I'm seeing that actual footage from the plane when it occurred, which was pulled off of YouTube by me on my iPad. Check it again, and I keep talking.
Upload it to YouTube. You can tap on the video right here to watch this video. The beauty that we can take a primary source and place it straight into our broadcast very easily. You can also see that.
If I touch this Twitter feed, we're on their Twitter page. So we're bringing the web into the video. It's inverting the paradigm. Instead of putting a video and putting stuff around it, we take everything and put it into our storytelling. And from time spent, you can just create amazingly deep stories very, very quickly. Thank you.
Thanks. Working in mobile, my favorite part of the demo is when you're just about finished and it says, your phone's almost full. So, but it was great that you actually made it in time. Our next speaker is Rob King, who's the Senior Vice President for Sports Center and News at ESPN. Here he is. And in charge of all news gathering operations. Before that, he worked in newspapers as a cartoonist. Is that true?
That's correct.
Okay, excellent. So in any case, Rob King.
I need a mic.
Microphone, give you. Try that.
Thank you. Thank you. So the exercise was largely about thinking about television in the future. And what I would ask you to do is join me in thinking about this exercise in a slightly different way, because it's really about our audience of the future before we start thinking about anything we do internally. The audience of the future is actually present now. There's no mass audience. There's a massive audience of individuals. So I live in the world of sports. And what I would tell you about what we know about this massive audience of individuals is that they've decided to spend time in the realm of sports after having undergone a rite of passage. And some of you will know what I mean when I keep going here. Everybody is born playing. Everybody likes to play. But certainly in American culture and in a lot of male-dominated culture, by the time you get to be about 13 or 14, you are told whether you get to continue to play or not. It's called high school teams. It's called getting cut. And at that point, traditionally, people have had to make a decision as to whether or not they're going to continue to care about playing or playing sports. And some, many of you in this room, might not care about sports at all. Those people who choose to remain in the world of sports, who do not get to play, make a decision about how they want to participate. They want to gamble. They want to play fantasy. They want to collect cards. What has changed, thanks to technology, is that we have a new generation of participant who feels that he or she is always the center of the news consumption world. And they pick and choose where they want to spend time. And because they have this power, they don't have to stop playing. So as was raised earlier today, there's a world of interaction and gaming and an understanding of being able to control your experience. So flash forward to what ESPN has to think about or care about. Think about what the leagues have to care about. What we all have to care about is providing an experience for the audience of the future that feels live and personal and social. And so what I'm proposing is I can envision a different way of broadcasting games, working with the leagues, working with the teams, working with the individuals, gathering data, and making data and the ability to select the data you want to spend time with part of what we present in covering the games. Because this generation of player, my son is 10 years old, he's on a soccer team, and he's played soccer since he was 5. And he's always been out in front, scoring goals. And this is the first year my son joined a team where there's a kid this big, all right? And this kid's gonna play when he's past 14. But my son's gonna participate when he's past 14 because he's accustomed to learning about football through playing Madden, or he's accustomed to learning about soccer by playing FIFA. And so what I envision is a world in which we start showing games with that layer of control and data over the top. So for example, you watch a football game, a play ends. Instead of having to sit there and watch a replay of the same play again and again, you are now shown the playbook. The playbook allows you to see what plays are likely to be called in this down and distance, what the percentage of success is, everything a coach might think about. In fact, it gives you the opportunity to select a play in the playbook and through the course of the game, see what your level of success might be. In a basketball game, as a player runs into an area where he is actually very effective, the floor beneath him turns green. And if he's in a place where he's a pretty poor shooter, the floor is red. And so you can always tell when there's a bad shot. In golf, there's a virtual caddy. So you have all the data necessary about wind and distance from the hole and success. And it's overlaid, and you can pick and choose to dive in or out of this experience. These are things that we're actually, like everybody else, experimenting with right now because there's a learning curve. But the newer generation of people who think, I need to be smarter, I need to have context, I need to know this in ways that allow me to play fantasy, to gamble better, to be smarter. This is all information they expect. And one last point. We have to get this right because whether it's any kind of news, people start from the standpoint of saying, I deserve it when I want it and how I want it. Because remember, there was a time where we were all born cartoonists. We all were. We were all drawing, and we loved it. And we went to school one day, and they gave us a piece of paper, and they gave us a pencil. And they said, okay, we're going to do the alphabet. And we all thought that sounded cool. So we said, yeah, we'll do the alphabet. And then they made us draw a capital A, which was just 3 lines. We could handle it, so we're doing the alphabet. And then you had to make a small a, which is a perfect circle and a straight line, which nobody can draw. And all of a sudden, you look around, and little kids are writing like this. Because we learned that we can draw wrong, right? In this world, because technology has made it easy for people to determine their experience and what they deserve and need, we have to do better. Thank you.
Thanks. So next up is Sean Mills, who's president of NowThis. And before that, he was CEO at Nerve, and then one of my favorite places, president at The Onion.
This will not be funny. I can find this video on here. I'm going to try to make this mostly video-centric so that you don't get bored listening to me. But NowThis, if you don't know NowThis, we make video for social. I guess I should stand on the stage. That's 100% what we do. We're a socially distributed media company, which means essentially that we're not interested in driving people to a website or an app or a channel or anything like that. We want to find people where they live, and we want to speak to them in sort of the native visual languages of those different platforms. So just as sort of social has become the new starting point, you know, it's the first thing you do in the morning, you look at your phone, it's really becoming the new endpoint too. So we're happy to sort of see all the growth that's been going on in the last 6 months in terms of people watching video in the native players on the different social platforms. And in the last year and a half, we've probably made about 20,000 videos. And I think we've learned a lot about thinking about how do you make a video different across different social platforms. How you think about video news for Snapchat is different than Vine, is different than Instagram. A story that you would tell on Twitter may not be appropriate for Facebook and vice versa. And so we think a lot about that. And we think in terms of social about how do we get the audience sort of more engaged in the video as well. And I think one of the notable things about social that we sometimes forget is that the audience really they're content creators. I mean, they are, as much as the platform themselves, the content they make is the product. And so the idea that I want to think about today is called markup, which is essentially our thinking about how do we get users to engage with the news video in the same way that we do. It's thinking about their native sort of visual languages that they use. And so the concept in general is basically this. We're going to take and cut the most interesting, powerful, memorable, telling, raw video moments of the day. We're going to give them to the user. And then we're going to build technology and tools that allow them to express themselves, remix, put their opinions in, their points of view in, and then make the video inherently sort of more shareable and more personal. So that's the idea behind markup. And the way we'll do it is we'll give them different forms of media. So it could be a text overlay, it could be a GIF, it could be music, it could be voiceover, animations, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a video to try to demonstrate how users might do that. And the first part of this is just really kind of drawing an analogy between the analog ways that we mark things up, the online ways we mark things up. I mean, right now, your comments live below a video player in a cluttered mess of other comments, or it's a Facebook like. We want to take it a step farther. So first we sort of imagined what a text overlay might look like.
What are you doing?
Stop pointing it!
Get back. What are you doing?
Stop pointing it! Put your fucking gun down! Hungry?
Good job, Sergeant!
Stand down!
Here's an example of
Hello,
different political
Iowa.
point of views.
It is true. I am thinking about it. But for today, that is not why I'm here. Hello, Iowa. It is true. I am thinking about it.
Never underestimate the power of GIFs. So this
We
will
grew
allow
up in a
users.
time. Listen, I had belts too. We grew up in a time where that was commonplace.
I got it like this.
Yeah. There's a standard now, and if it goes beyond the pale and it's not reasonable, that's when the felony charges step in, and
All right,
that's
so
why
you
the
can do
grand jury
it. So a
indicted them.
switch is always wrong in your view. My father should have been arrested based on today's standards.
Maybe, yes.
That's nuts.
Maybe.
Did you get hit with the belt?
Oh, yeah.
So that's why you became a shrink.
And
And then you can also have some fun with this stuff too, with music.
Work it, Daddy. You got soul. Yo, you better give me that money.
You get it. So that's it. So that's the idea, getting users more engaged with the raw video moments and making them more inherently shareable. Thank you.
Thanks. Next up is Adam Ellick from the New York Times. He's been to 70 countries, but more important, he worked on that innovation report that sort of was pretty rocking. So, there you go.
Okay, thanks. So I've been thinking quite a bit about how to tell stories differently when I'm in the field, which is often internationally, and news is breaking around me, and it's very chaotic. So the problem is that about 10 years ago, when online video started taking off, we started making the only thing we know, which is TV news. But unfortunately, we made something even worse, which was really bad TV news, just when you thought it couldn't get any worse. Thanks. And essentially what happened is over the 10 years, we started getting a little bit better at it, but I would argue that collectively, we never really cracked the content platform code. So there was disruption, content code, I'm sorry. There was disruption on the platform side, but there wasn't any real disruption on the content side. Now, you could argue that Vice and Zev Frank and explainers are cracking the content code, but I would argue collectively we're still wrestling in that space. So I started thinking, how can we deconstruct the TV package? Because we're now at disruption platform 2.0, so we never figured out the desktop content code, and now we're in mobile. So it's a new platform, but yet we're still stuck 2 generations in the past when it comes to content. So I started looking at a lot of old packages that I made, and this one is from 5 years ago, and I won't bore you with the video clips, but it's from Afghanistan, and it's 7 minutes. And every time I brought stuff back from the field to one of my best editors, I would go on and on about everything that I got in the field, and he would always say, okay, what are the 3 best things you got? What are the 2 best things I got? And in this case, I said, well, I have this B-roll of an Afghan woman begging in the street, and I got really lucky in reporting this story for 4 days. I walked into a wedding scene at a widow shelter, and this old 60-year-old man came in and married a blind widow who he had never met in less than 10 minutes. And my editor said, wow, that's one of your moments. And then there was this woman who was 37 years old, and just the tight shot of her face was a moment. So he essentially said, you have 3 things here, and all the rest is garbage. So your only task is to get to these 3 moments as soon as possible. And everything else is nut graph, setup, exposition, bridges, transitions, you know the drill. And all of these other things, except for the 3 moments, are really bad for 2 sets of people. It's a big problem for the viewer because the viewer has to endure a few minutes in order to get to a few moments. So of course, if 2 of the best moments are at the 2-minute mark and the 4-minute mark, and video is increasingly social and scrollable and not a passive experience, you have to endure the worst parts in order to see the best parts. It makes no sense. It's also really bad for the video journalists because you spend most of your days collecting the elements, often B-roll, getting lookout shots, which can take 2 hours to go up to the lookout point, and then you miss sunset, and then you go back the next day, and telling people to walk in and out of an office with a briefcase so you can have a setup shot and say that they're 47 years old and they've been in this job. This stuff is a huge time suck in the field. And then, if you're a one-man band and you're overseas, then you're spending overnights editing this stuff. And all editing really is creating a shell or a template in order to showcase all of these transitions and setup and exposition. The moments speak for themselves or require just a little bit of setup. The other huge problem for the VJ is that it's not sustainable and it's misery. That's me in Pakistan after not sleeping for 3 or 4 days. And the misery has nothing to do with Pakistan. So this is something that I've been working on to try to solve this problem for the user and the VJ. It's a scrollable mobile template that I hope to use in the field. And I'm sorry it's a bit distant here. But this is my day 1 template. So it's an elastic template that changes by the day. And the first video is maybe 30 seconds, and the next one is 15 seconds. These are my 2 moments from day 1 in the square. On the side is an engagement platform where people can tell me what they want to see in the field, and it's a mobile alert that goes to my phone to ground me in an otherwise pretty chaotic environment, and I can reply to them or publicly. And instead of all the setup and the B-roll and the transitions, I'm just writing, 100 words or 200 words to set up those moments and not even trying to do it in a perfect video narrative. Day 2, day 3, day 4, the template changes, and now I actually have enough to tell a story. So maybe I have a 1-minute primer at the top that places you in the story with all of my snippets afterwards. Again, this requires the VJ to actually write and construct sentences and not just shoot pretty B-roll. And on the 3rd week, maybe, I have a documentary that's 7 minutes long with 500 words first person on how I came to find this story. And I get to sleep more, and users don't have to watch really boring transitions to set up all of my best moments. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. Okay, up next is Jason White, who's steeped in TV news, NBC, CNN, PBS, but now he's Facebook's go-to guy for news organization partnerships.
All right, well, thanks all for having me here. When I told my colleagues I would be presenting on the future of TV news, one of them helpfully suggested that I talk about television without screens and only remotes. No one else will talk about that. I thought maybe not a good idea. So we've launched some products recently of relevance for this space, some APIs that make it a little easier to get data and content off of Facebook and into your television broadcast systems. We've overhauled our video product on Facebook, which makes it much easier for you to get your stories out within our platform. But I'm actually not going to talk about any of that today, and instead I want to focus on storytelling, which actually you could say is kind of the theme of the last few little presentations we've had here. So when you think about digital natives, I think one of the defining characteristics of them is that they get their news in feeds. It could be Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, so on. And I think this has profound implications for the way we tell stories, especially the way broadcasters tell stories. Right now, in a multi-channel world, broadcasters tell stories and cover a lot of the same news in kind of a lot of the same ways, maybe 5–10% difference in the storytelling. But when you put all that content together in a single feed on any of these platforms, you start realizing how similar it all looks. And it's hard to stand out, and it's created a pretty big market opening for folks like BuzzFeed and NowThis and others who are thinking a little bit differently about news. Anyone know who these guys are? They are. They're the American Pickers, Mike and Frank. So I love these guys. I love this show. They are just 2 guys from Iowa. They run a junk shop. They drive around in their white van through Nebraska and Kansas and upper Michigan and Wisconsin. And they just look for junk, like cool stuff that they can sell in their store. But what really draws me in is that they are going to places that other people aren't going. You don't see those places on the news very much, right? We're all stuck in our cities. They also come across amazing characters along the way, like absolutely amazing people. Like this guy, Fast Eddie, and another guy named Mole Man. Like if you ever need to just Google Mole Man and you will meet one of the most unusual people in America. There are some great videos with this guy. So I think inspired by kind of the example of American Pickers, if I was going to create a new TV news show, I think I would have 3 rules of things that you cannot do. First, no studio segments ever. What's the first thing you do when you're creating a new show today? You design a studio, you get a host, and that's everything is built around that. Second, let's focus on people who've not been on TV before. No talking heads, even newsmakers. You get the same quotes, right? Time after time after time, place after place. Like, let's go out there and talk to people that we aren't usually talking to. And the third one, and I think this really gets to one thing that makes Mike and Frank so successful, is they're deeply engaged with their subject. Like, these guys know who they are, they know what they're passionate about, you know what they're passionate about, and that really, really draws you in. So it's that kind of dispassionate storytelling. You see some of this now. So CNN is making some moves in this direction with their Sunday night schedule, right? Hiring Anthony Bourdain. He's not doing news really in any way, shape, or form at this point, but you could certainly imagine a Bourdain-like show that is more topical or is covering more news subjects. And I think that would do really well on TV. It would certainly do well within Facebook. This is not related to TV directly. It's a story by Ta-Nehisi Coates of the Atlantic Monthly. He made the case for reparations. It was an incredibly provocative piece. He clearly threw himself into it. He was passionate about it. You met great characters through this piece. But one thing that stands out to me about this piece, sitting where I do on the Facebook partnerships team, was how well this did on Facebook. Like, people were hungry for this kind of deep and intelligent content, and they shared it like crazy, which was great for the Atlantic and great for people on Facebook. And I think that actually says a lot about the future of TV. Thanks a lot, guys.
So Ta-Nehisi is a teacher here this semester too, which is pretty exciting for us. So next up is Mark Briggs, who's an author. He's written about entrepreneurial journalism. He worked in newspaper websites, and now he's director of digital media for King 5, which is a TV station that does some pretty amazing local news. That's it. Right click, right button to go forward.
Hey, thanks for having me. Really happy to be here. Yeah, as you heard, I work at a local TV station, which makes me one of the few people here. How many of you watched local TV in the last week? Raise your hand. Okay, that's good. How many of you watched Last Week Tonight by John Oliver in the last week? Okay, a few more. So my idea really is to take TV news, and this, by the way, is a Google image search for TV news, and you notice that Ron Burgundy is #2. And I can't believe that we made it all the way to this part of the day, and I'm the first person who's mentioned Ron Burgundy. How is that possible? So to give you a little bit of background about what happens at a local TV station today, we put out 10 hours of newscasts per day. So it starts at 4:30 a.m., goes till 9 a.m., comes back at 12, goes till 1, comes back at 4. We just added a 4 o'clock news. Goes another one at 5, then there's one at 6:30, then there's one at 9, then there's one at 10, there's one at 11. So The Innovator's Dilemma, you may have heard that book. I live that, right? I get new ideas. I go down to the newsroom and I say, let's do this. And they all say, don't have time. Got to get on the air. So we are definitely in the era of doing more with less. So in order to be innovative, we sometimes have to go the other way, which means, like, if you read The Innovator's Dilemma, the way mainframe computer companies looked at the PC and said, oh, it's too cheap, it's too slow, and it'll never catch on. So that's kind of what we're looking for here. What I'm offering is a cheap alternative and hope that that forms some sense of innovation. We live in the age of personalization. I probably don't need to tell you all about that. I really enjoy the video content that is personal. So I love SourceFed's feel and quality. Some of their content, not so much, but I think we've seen and heard some really great examples of how this works. Last Week Tonight with John Oliver is, I think, one of my favorite things on television. I don't even watch television. On video right now. I love instructive videos. We talked a little bit about that earlier. One of my favorite things is Common Craft. They do videos of things in plain English with little cardboard cutouts that they move around on a whiteboard and draw arrows. You never see this done in news. I mean, and it would be so simple to do. And what the idea is that we need more reporting. So we need less live shots for the sake of being live, right, Jeff? And we need more reporting. So if you did that as a small screen newscast, you took everything away. So while I loved that iPad demonstration, my idea is what you do everything on a smartphone for a smartphone. No graphics, no extra layers of anything. It's just a reporter who's being smart, almost like Adam Davidson's team at Planet Money, as if you're on radio, and you allow them the ability to go get the information that's interesting to people. We started doing this just simply inside of Facebook because, again, it's tough to get anything experimental on the air because there just isn't time because they're too busy doing what they've always done. And we could do a whole nother conference on that. But these have played really well. So we ask a reporter to go do, and we're calling them a one-take, and they are doing video selfies, or sometimes the photographer will shoot it, but it's short, it's conversational, there's no voice of God, there's no graphics. It's like someone is talking to you and telling you the information and interesting stuff you want to know. So the reason that small screen newscasts could potentially work is it forces production to focus on the message, forces the presentation to be personal, and makes information the priority. And I'm not saying that this is the new and innovative thing, that if someone turned on 30 minutes of iPhone reporting, they would go, wow, this is the future of news. My thinking is like what Adam was saying earlier, if you allowed the creative people more time to focus on the information and the subject, then they would create what is the future of news. And so in some ways you have to take a step back, strip much of what the future could be away, and then build it up again from there. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. So up is, next is Riyadh Minty, who's the founder of AJ Plus, who just released their very cool app, and I guess he's going to tell us about that.
Thanks. So I'm not going to tell you about the app because Jeff told me I'm not allowed to talk about what we're working on at the moment.
It's really cool. Okay, so.
So yeah, I mean, I'll tell you a bit about it. So we're talking about reinventing TV news. So I come from Al Jazeera. AJ Plus is the first digital project from Al Jazeera. I've been with the network for the last 8 years trying to reinvent TV news. We've done a lot of cool stuff in the TV space, but eventually they got sick of me, kicked me out of Doha, sent me to San Francisco and said, mobile first, let's figure this stuff out and how do we reinvent news? And really that's the focus of where we went to. How do we reinvent news for a new medium? And what we realized very quickly is that TV is not dying, it's just audiences are migrating into different spaces and how people engage with each other. And in order to really come up with a cool, innovative product, we really had to go back to the drawing board. I've spent the last 1.5 years doing a lot of research into what does this really mean, how do we create a new experience, and if you were to build a mobile-first product, how does it work? We're now at about 86 staff based in San Francisco. We have around 1,700 fellows around the world who've applied to join us. Our app at the moment, in the first 2 days, I think it's number 7 in the App Store, and it's very much an engaged, immersive experience. And a lot of that comes from going back to the drawing board. So I'll take you a bit through this journey and kind of where we're heading to. I've been caught up in launch mode, so I've really been thinking mobile first and just trying to think maybe 5 years ahead is what Jeff told me. So this slide we came up with in 2006, and this was really the challenge. How do we begin to engage with this? And this was all well and good, and I think we finally cracked this in a way with our app. But then all of a sudden, I talk to my nephews and nieces, and this is how kids are growing up today. When I call my niece on the phone, she's like, why are you calling me? I want to Skype with you. And she's 3 years old. Because it's a very visual medium, and we need to understand that younger audiences, even a millennial audience to a large extent, we're growing up with technology. It's part of our life. It's not seen as an extension going to TV or anywhere else. It's part of who we are. It's an extension of our brand. It's an extension of identity, and it's an extension of how we function. So how do we deal with this? Relevance. I mean, we noticed this at Al Jazeera. People trust people first. They're not coming to you for a brand anymore. They get in their news through their personal networks, through their friends. When breaking news happens, a lot of the time, the first place when I get a message saying, hey, have you seen the story? I go onto Twitter, and I get it from a reference of friends, and I click on that link. It's a short URL. I don't really care where it's taking me to. I care about the person who's referring me to that information. So how do you make news more sociable, more shareable? And we're starting to see a lot of innovation in this space. How do you get into the social streams? How do you get into people's conversation streams? And how do you become part of the conversation versus speaking at an audience? So millennials, I'm going to take you through a bit of a journey of kind of where this is kind of my life. I was 13 years old at MIRC. I actually met my wife on MIRC chat, which is interesting. And that was kind of the space where we go to and you just kind of engage and have fun with people as a young audience. MySpace, the age of personal branding, it's all about me, myself, and I get into your kind of 18 to 20-year-old. By the time I dropped out of college, but a lot of my friends were in college. Facebook, keeping us connected with friends, people who were there. Twitter, an idea sharing network. As you get older, as you get out of college, you want to start engaging with ideas and people, so more of an information-based network versus a social network. Moving into LinkedIn, everyone wants to start looking for a job. So as you get older in life, you start going through these different networks. And Google Plus kind of tried to figure out grouping people together as people go through these different age cycles. And this is really me from age 13 to where I am today. I've gone through these cycles, and you've seen these younger generation of people as they come in on board. They have the same sort of needs. So you've seen your Snapchats just placed your MySpace. You've seen different platforms emerge to fulfill people's social needs. The question is, how do we then develop? You know, I'm going to get older. I'm still going to go to the big screen. But how am I going to be engaging as I get older through life? What sort of platforms, what sort of needs am I going to get? As you start having kids, as you start having your family start growing, how would I want to engage in that space? So your mobile phone obviously is the remote control for your life that keeps you connected to everything. But what's next? This is a watch my brother had a long time ago. Kind of a remote controlled cool party trick, could change the channel on TVs. You know, everyone hates to talk about wearables, but like it or not, they're coming. You know, you've seen the first iterations of it, where it's coming out. And the challenge is, how do we design for wearables? You know, as I said, I spent the last 1.5 years thinking about how to reinvent TV news for mobile space. The challenge now, looking 5 years ahead, is how do we get into the space of creating bite-sized, smaller screen, on-the-go, and hyper-personal news? Because these devices track so much information about you, where you are, the context of where you're going to be. So how do we develop for that? And how do we then take people from this journey into a smartphone, into the bigger screen, and get them interested into different spaces? I don't have the solutions for this yet, but I can tell you from my experience of doing mobile first, it means we need to go back to the drawing board. Going back to my first slide, where I said that, you know, it's not about rethinking TV news, we need to rethink mobile news. Mobile is at the place where everyone's talking about it now, but if you really want to think a few years ahead, we need to start thinking in wearables, and how do we reinvent for this bite-sized space and take people through that journey? Thank you.
Thanks very much. Okay, one more to go before we have questions. So Steve Alperin started at CNN, then he went to work for ABC with Peter Jennings, and then to the website, ABC News, and now he's the Chief Business Officer at Vocative. Did I say that right?
We say vocative, it sounds better in France, but I think I have a presentation, but I'm happy to do it. It's really cool to be here, and I see some folks I haven't seen forever, which is fantastic. I'm going to start with I wrote that line probably, I decided this morning 2,500 times in my career. Good evening. I'll wait, because there might be some audio. Good evening, we begin tonight with, and then someone said something important. And what's interesting, what I want to talk to you guys about very simply is the next thing, which is saying, that doesn't work, so I'll just talk, saying we don't know. And I think that no one's ever done that. And we're working on a company right now that's about 10 months old that goes and finds signals and looks at the 80% of the internet that's not on social media. And it's sort of a controversial thing to say we don't know. We have partners at NBC News now, and we are providing pieces at scale. Someone said they hate packages earlier, the gentleman with the bow tie who I respect a lot, but we're doing little films, I would say. And what's interesting about the world now is if you had said in 2008, January 1st, 2008, if I stood here and said there'll be 8 or 9 dictators who will fall, there'll be a financial crisis that'll cripple the world, you would have said there's a place over on the east side called Bellevue, have fun. And I think that the age of experts is dwindling. I believe in expertise, but I don't know about experts. I think there's a lot of people who concur the voice of God is kind of finito. And so we think that there's an interesting way to do it. And if you don't want to know what I mean, this week in New York City, there was a report about ISIS and lone wolves and pipe bombs. And that little report started on our increasingly not so little website. And we, you know, I went back to my house. I live all the way downtown. And all the stock exchange was, you know, the cops were out doing their Hercules thing. And I said to myself, holy shit. We saw that and we wrote an article, and that came from us. We saw that, we wrote an article, and we said, we don't know, but we found this on an ISIS forum. Here's what this person has said before for the last 2 or 3 years, and we put it out for the world. And we didn't actually, you know, it was actually a debate, as it should be in any kind of news organization, I think worth its salt. We haven't done that on television yet. And lest you think this is sort of an esoteric thing, the real value, I think, that's been created in the news business, if you look at it on a dollar terms, there's a place called Fox News that does $1.5 billion in free cash flow a year. And the real innovation there was getting a very large group of people in the country to believe that they were getting something different and that the other guys weren't doing it. And I think that this idea is, in some ways, extraordinarily powerful. It represents the idea that there's so much of the world that we don't understand. It represents the idea that there are low-frequency signals, there's data, there's a conversation that we want to be investigators, not gatekeepers. And so when I think about doing this on television, I don't know that I have the answer, and I don't know, like, I love the iPad stuff, and pretty much everyone who's presented today, it's extraordinary stuff. I don't have the answer of how to do this yet, and I can certainly make up the television show and probably write it, but I think that the worldview, the voice, the tone, and the outlook are something that could create an extraordinary value. We're just starting. That's why I sort of, with looking at Hal and Jeff in the spirit of this, it's something we haven't actually done it. We're starting to do it on the internet. Doing it on television and doing it at mass distribution is, I think, a next step. So we really haven't done this. But I was going to play, someone said to me, with a nod to Kanye West and a colleague of mine called Bill Pearsall, he was going to play, on Hot 97 in the morning, they do this thing where they play Kanye and he goes, "We don't know. We don't know." And it's a really hard thing to say to people who are journalists who, a lot of people are know-it-alls, and I like to have a couple drinks and kind of are looking at Simon Surwitz, a couple Sancerre, and like sit and sort of pretend we do, and I'm getting the 1 minute sign. But that's what I think there's a lot of value to be created, and I don't think anyone's doing it, and I can be more specific than anyone wants, but that's sort of my revolutionary idea of a Friday afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Neil. I was wrong. We have 3 more to go, and I was told that by our next speaker, because he didn't want me to cut him out. Anyways, Jeff Jarvis is the reason that I came to this school, because of what he thinks and what he does.
You're blaming me, are you?
And now it's your fault, right?
So I figured, as they say in Silicon Valley, we eat our own dog food. I figure in this case I should serve my own dog food. And if you're all supposed to come up with ideas, so should I. So could I have my... It's not there. It's okay, I can vamp. Screw it, okay. So Mac App Store? No, I'm Android, I'm not Mac. So here's my idea. The Brady Bunch will save TV. So I was a TV critic at TV Guide many years ago, and by the way, I just saw this morning that TV Guide Network is dropping the TV Guide brand because it's so worthless now. It's going to be called Pop. So I was a TV critic, and my boss was a woman named Anthea Disney, and I had lunch with Anthea sometimes later, and we talked about the genius of Fox News. And the genius of Fox News and Roger Ailes was certainly not journalistic. It was economical, right? It was realizing that conversation was what would make news happen, and it was a lot cheaper than doing packages. But the problem was, the weakness was, they had to wait until Judge, what's his name? Okay, somebody has to watch Fox News. Napolitano, thank you very much. Judge Napolitano shows up, and I know this because I used to work at Condé Nast. I was a block away. They would call me up and say, "Can you come over and talk about whatever?" And I would always say, "Yes, I'll find something to talk about." And I'd sit down and I'd start talking, and then when the real guest they wanted showed up, they'd give me the bum's rush. Because I was the third choice, right? So the weakness in the Ailes model, you can name many of them, but the economic weakness was they had to wait for somebody to show up. So I said to my old friend Anthea, Anthea, they have these newfangled things called webcams. They're really cool. And if you had one in the judge's office and one in the judge's home, you could have the judge on at any time, or you could have all kinds of people on. And she said, that's a good idea, Jeff. You should go talk to Vice President so-and-so. And I did go talk to Vice President so-and-so, and I told him about this silly idea, and he said in that stentorian broadcast voice, "Well, that wouldn't be broadcast quality." Kill, right? Now, that saved me from helping Fox News in life, and I'm grateful for that. But I always had this idea. Now, what happened was, not very much later, along came the Iraq War, and along came sat phones, and really bad video of Oliver North. "Near the front, we found the weapons of mass destruction," right? And so it was acceptable to have video that wasn't broadcast quality. So then not much later, I was doing segments on MSNBC through a webcam in my home about what these bloggers said today. What did all the whole blogosphere say today? Jeff, what did the bloggers say about the Pope dying? Well, the bloggers are unhappy the Pope died. Bullshit, we did it, right? Now then the cams went away. What was the problem there? They used cams as a fad, not for what they should have been, which is a way to bring in all kinds of voices into television. So here's the idea of what I want to do. Imagine, if you will, it's not hard, the Brady Box Bunch. You all know the Brady Bunch? Hollywood Squares, right? So imagine there that you have a box, and in each box, in each square, is someone with a webcam. And they could be people who are witnesses. It could be people, old people talking about Social Security. It could be experts. It could be just citizens asking questions. And underneath them, each of them, is their lower third, as we say in the profession, is their tweet, what they're saying right now about the topic. And then imagine that you have, I don't know, Wolf Blitzer in the center square as Paul Lind, and he can manage the conversation going on. And he says, okay, now Fred number 1 has something interesting to say. Sorry, that's Fred number 1, you're Fred number 2. Fred number 2 has something better to say, and you go around. Then imagine also there's a social world around this. And there's a chat room, as we have on This Week in Tech, where people can talk about what they think, and they have the chance to get in the conversation. And you tell them, you tell Sarah, turn on your webcam, you join the conversation. And imagine if it's my own dog food. I said 5 minutes, it's 5 minutes for me too. And so then you have the possibility of having lots of new voices on television. You have the possibility of conversations that are more than just the shrieking and screaming of this side, that side, Chinese menu TV. You have the chance to change the voice of television and broaden it and prove to CNN that there are plenty of people to talk to in the world. Thank you very much.
Thanks. So next up is Ted Canalongo, who's from Ohio. And we had a contest here, and he won it. And a lot of people have talked about personalizing local news, and that's what you've done, right?
It is what we've done.
And so he's going to show us.
Well, actually, I'm really more just going to talk about our vision for the future of news delivery through digital. And I want to start with a question, and that's, who does a newscast serve? If you ask any broadcast journalist, they'll likely give you the same answer. They serve the community. But if you think about the last newscast you watched, how well did it really meet your individual needs? And I'm going to start by imagining a hypothetical viewer, and we'll call her Helen. And Helen's in her late 60s. She's a breast cancer survivor. She's had a history of Alzheimer's in her family, and she's really concerned with steps that she can take to minimize her risk of developing that disease. Additionally, Helen lives on the south side of Indianapolis with her husband, who spent most of his career as a unionized welder. And the couple has been struggling with trying to rebuild their retirement accounts following the recession. Now, Helen's also concerned about a recent surge of crime in her neighborhood within the last couple of months. So today, when 5 p.m. rolls around, what's Helen going to do? Well, the exact same thing that she's done for the last 2 decades. She's going to turn on the television to her favorite channel and watch the evening news. And what is she actually going to end up seeing? Well, she'll find out about the possibility of a strike in the Carmel Clay School District on the north side of the city. She may find out about a shooting that occurred downtown. She'll find out the latest on whether or not Justin Bieber and Selena Gomez are still an item. And maybe if she's lucky, she'll get 30 seconds about a promising new study that links dietary changes to Alzheimer's prevention. Oh, and of course there's weather too. In fact, most days that's the most relevant content that she gets. She completely misses the story about Parkinson's research from a competing station, even though she secretly worries about her husband because of his exposure to welding fumes early in his career. So what if today, instead, when she turned on that program, she ended up seeing coverage from an expert that gave her advice about how to rebuild the accounts that lost all that money 6 years ago. Then we followed up with weather. And after weather, she finds out about an increased police presence in her community following a shooting that just occurred down the street last week. Finally, she hears from an Indiana University Medical Center doctor to give recommendations about BRCA test for hereditary breast cancer, something her own daughter has recently been considering. Now, you might think this type of vision is impossible, because after all, these local stations have maybe 30 minutes, 60 minutes per program, and they have to find this delicate balance between stories that are informative, they're educational, and they're engaging, and bring that to a mass audience. It's truly a one-size-fits-all program. Worse, there's this risk of alienating one audience when you try to bring in new viewers. And my brother is a local news producer in Indianapolis, and he's watched this happen firsthand, where they went chasing after the very influential young female audience and started bringing in coverage about style and entertainment and maybe how to pay off your student loan debt. And what they ended up finding is that their ratings dropped as a result. And they kind of panicked and said, well, wait, not now, and they backtracked. So at Class 6, this has been the very problem that we've been striving to solve. And what we do basically is we allow content providers of any type, national, local, new media, independent journalists, even print, all to submit their content to our platform. Now, behind the scenes, we're assessing every story that a user watches from any source for signals that give us clues about the type of content that resonates with them and the content that's relevant to the geography that they're in. This allows us the capability to use their entire viewing history across all these different sources to select from the array of available programming and create an incredibly personalized, analytics-driven newscast for the user. Now, we do this today with about 200 different national and local sources in 3 different countries. But to realize the true vision that I just described, television stations need to begin thinking about not just creating watered-down content that scratches the surface of everyone's needs, but creating individual story segments that do this deep dive into the subjects that matter for each individual audience segment. The thing is, they wouldn't create this personalized news channel alone either. Helen would actually have an opportunity to see that Parkinson's story from the station she never watches. Now, you might be wondering why they'd want to do this. And considering that young female audience that we described earlier, that station desperately wanted to grow their viewership by reaching those individuals, but they found that the short-term risks were just too great. So by exploring the analytics that connect the right stories to the right viewers, they can look at the market as a whole to see which interests are being underserved from a local perspective and cover those interests with new and innovative content. Taken further, those analytics could even suggest untold stories, giving a voice to an audience that's often unheard. Now, this can extend to a multitude of different demographics and life situations. So you could have reports on enterovirus that look at it from the point of view of a mother who has a young infant, to an educator who's wondering what she needs to do to protect her students, and to Helen, who's wondering if she needs to be concerned as well. Again, these wouldn't come from just one sources. It could come from across the board, so there wouldn't be the same level of redundancy in content that we have today. So I think there's this tremendous opportunity to develop this new era of coverage facilitated by the power of digital delivery and free from the constraints of broadcast. And understanding that everyone here today comes from very diverse backgrounds, realize this revolution could take many different forms. It could be newsrooms reorganizing their content around the demographics that they want to serve. It could be a bunch of individual journalists in a city, each focusing on the topics that they know about. And it could even be a concerned citizen who just wants to shoot some video at the local school board meeting in a rural community to inform the other people in their town. So I hope that's given you some inspiration, kind of how we see things going from the point of view of Helen, and maybe gives you some ideas as we look to the future. Thanks.
Up next is one of our own, Christian Fahrenbach, who's a German strategist, but is also a Town Night Entrepreneurial Fellow for 2014.
Yes. So welcome, everybody. As was being said, I was part of the Town Night program this spring, which is a program where the students get 4 months in order to come up with your own journalism startup. And what you can see behind me, which could probably be set into motion, is the startup I came up with. It's a project called Ach darum geht's.de, and which translates to that'swhatit'sallabout.com. It's an explainer brand for with animated videos that explains the context of news. So, for example, if you want to know something about the Ukraine and who's Putin and why everybody hates him, you get a very good idea in the 2 minutes. And the things I want to share now are two parts. One is what did we actually learn about mobile when we came up with the idea? And 2 is what happened when I tried to sell it in Germany to the German news companies. So, could you start the video? And turn off the audio? because then that would embarrass all the other fellows who can dub it by now.
DE.
No, just switch it off.
Nordkorea.
Thanks. And so what you can see is that the first thing we tried is we wanted it to work on mobile in terms of it has to work without audio. So you have to get an idea of what's going on, and you have to maybe even learn something without actually hearing the voiceover, because what happens is on mobile, people don't always plug their earphones in or their headphones in. So people don't really, or if they want to show it to other people, maybe it's, they're in a loud surrounding, whatever. So the idea is to actually, you understand some parts of it as well. Another thing is that you don't want to put too much on the slides, because otherwise people cannot watch it on every screen size. And what we did is you swipe away quite often what happens. And the third thing we did is that you have to have some animation, obviously, especially on mobile. There's a lot of things going on around the people, and a lot of things attract their attention. And so you have to have some animation all the time. These were some of the key findings for this first prototype, which is about North Korea. And to give you a bit of an insight about the German market, we probably lag behind 1 or 2 years in terms of online. So I was thinking, okay, I should present this to the online news websites in Germany, because it would bridge a gap, which is the gap between the current events going on that day and the actual background or the Wikipedia article of it, because news websites could take these videos and put it as related content on every breaking news story every day. And the first feedback we got so far was actually pretty much pointing towards that direction. People liked it, and people thought, okay, I can see where this is going, and this is actually adding value, because right now in Germany there's no such thing as Vox.com, and the budgets for an explainer website on its own aren't there yet. So we thought, okay, this could be nice to actually sell it to the big news websites, and they got very interested in that. I spoke to some of the biggest brands like Spiegel and Focus and Zeit, but it turns out there's not much money there, and so I don't know if it was me or if it was them not having like the actual power to give away the money, but where we stand right now is that there wasn't a single company who actually said, well, okay, here's a couple of $1,000, we try it out with 10 videos, and then we can see where this is going. And so I'd really be interested in talking to you afterwards, and that's why I'm at the end to maybe open up the discussion a bit. I'd really be interested in your experience with,
ready to go to the next step.
Do you have the money, or do your bosses give you the money? Who sits on the money? Because I really think there must be some cash in there, because a lot of money shifts from TV to online, and we heard a lot about online. But so yeah, please talk to me and give me the money. Where's everybody?
Thanks. Oh, we have two people more, but they're coming to you in the magic of video. So we're going to just play those quickly. People who've thought sort of deeply about audiences and about a lot of these things. Just don't throw anything at the screen. So the first is Michael Rosenblum.
I was delighted to be invited to this conference on the future of television news, but unfortunately I can't make it. So Jeff said I could participate by video as long as I stuck to 3 rules. 1, don't talk about past achievements. 2, don't trash conventional television news. And 3, keep it under 3 minutes. I may have difficulty with all of those, but I'll try and stick to the third one. Television and television news specifically are children of technology. Television news didn't come from nowhere. It came out of a technology of big cameras, expensive edits, and pushing information through the air or through cable. The architecture of television and television news was therefore a function of what that technology could do. In the last 30 years, that technology has changed radically, but the architecture of television news has basically remained unchanged for 30 years. You see, I haven't really trashed television news, I've just pointed it out. If we were going to reinvent television news based on the technology of 2014 and what's coming, we would have something very different. So while many of you are probably talking about minor corrections and the implications of the internet and things like that, my advice is trash the whole thing. Burn to the ground, and let's start over from scratch. As Gloria Swanson once said, if you're going to have a baby, you should have a new one. What then would television news look like based solely upon the technology that's available to us today? The best way to do this is to look at the most successful internet information companies, because news, after all, is an information business. And that would be things like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, eBay, Airbnb, TripAdvisor, companies with valuations of anywhere from $1 billion to $135 billion at current rates of valuation, none of them more than 10 years old. But all purely children of the technology that exists the same, and they do the same thing as television news in their own way. They go out in the world, they gather information, they process it, and they make it available to a viewership. That's what television news is supposed to do. There are now a handful of reporters, a handful of correspondents around the world gathering news in their own strange way, in a very expensive way, and particularly kind of not very interesting in a fairly predictable way. But what if we embrace this new technology and we did it in a completely different way? For example, if you look at Facebook, Internet, Twitter, eBay, all those things, they all have one thing in common. The thing they have in common is that 100% of their content comes from user-generated material. That is, there are no producers at eBay. There are no writers at Facebook going out and reporting on what you think is interesting, then writing it up and putting it on Facebook. If they did, those companies couldn't exist. There are no executive producers at eBay deciding on what we should lead with, because that doesn't make any sense either. Is it possible then to do television news in the same model as Facebook, eBay, and Instagram and all these other great successes? It certainly is. And the reason it's possible is because of this little device, which is obviously an iPhone or a smartphone. There are now 1.4 billion of these things in circulation around the world. And obviously they're not phones anymore, and while media companies think of them as platforms where you can read advertising, what these things actually are is they are nodes of content creation. That is, they are capable of creating video, editing it, uploading it, text, photographs, tweets, whatever you want, and putting it out to the world, anywhere in the world, for free. And there are 1.4 billion of these in circulation in the world right now, soon to be 3 billion. 3 billion nodes of content creation. 3 billion camera crews, if you will. Bill Keller, the managing editor of the New York Times, recently wrote in the Times that he loved his job because he had 35 correspondents or 75 correspondents in 35 bureaus around the world. That is pathetic. It is pathetic that an institution like the New York Times depends upon 75 people around the world when there are 1.4 billion people with the technical capacity to tell their own stories. How am I doing? Let's take a look at Iraq. We've been in Iraq for 12 years now. There are probably 2 or 3 million people in Iraq with smartphones capable of shooting video, uploading it with pictures and sharing it with the world. In those 12 years, how many times have you seen video from Iraqis on NBC or CBS News? Not to trash those news organizations, Jeff. How many times have you ever seen any of that video? How much of that video do you think is being produced on a daily basis that you don't see it? Why don't you see it? Because you don't trust what they say. You can't trust what an Iraqi whose town is being bombed actually has to say about it. You would rather send a correspondent from New York who doesn't speak the language, hasn't lived there, doesn't know the culture, doesn't know the history, doesn't know anyone, to report the news as they see it on your network and put it out. Well, that's why, not to trash television, television news sucks. I'm not really trashing it, I'm just making an editorial comment here. The opportunity for a television news organization to change the way they think. We are no longer sending people out in the world to gather material and bring it in. We have 1.4 billion people around the world who have things to say, and our job in television news now is to aggregate, to curate, to edit, and to present the entire spectrum of opinion from people who actually know what they're talking about. And if I were reinventing television news, that's what I would do. I'm out of time. If you have any questions, email me, or tweet me, or Facebook me, or any of those other ways that the real news business takes place today. Thanks. See ya.
The stage. So, the last one is from Jim Brady, who's the CEO of Stomping Ground.
He's the CEO of BillyPen.com.
He's the CEO now of BillyPen.com. That was a quick promotion, actually. This is amazing. Here we go.
Good afternoon. Sorry I couldn't make the event in person today, but my idea for reinventing local TV news is to turn it into more of a civic engagement platform. One of the benefits of television is the ability to gather a collective audience, a shared audience that can witness the same thing at the same time. In this disaggregated world, the power to amass people at once is, I believe, underappreciated. My own personal argument would be using that collective audience to repeat news that most of the people already know, or add maybe a little context to stories people are already familiar with, is not necessarily the best use of that opportunity. A civic engagement platform on local television would take a typical story and would use the fact that it has a number of people amassed at the same time to try to educate people on the issues at hand in a local community, would then try to turn those issues into discussions and conversations and gather ideas from different folks out in the field via social media. It would bring on local community leaders on the air to have a discussion. It would hold events. It would use the power of personality, which television has more than any other medium, to convene local citizens to discuss issues of import. And it would take an active role in trying to resolve and address local key community issues. It would get rid of the typical kind of fire and, if it leads, it bleeds sort of mentality. Now that may be more complicated for ratings, and that may be why we continue to do the traditional if it leads, it bleeds type material. But as time goes on and viewers get, content gets more and more disaggregated, the audience for local TV news will probably continue to decline regardless of what stories are being covered out in the field, is if those stories are generally a recitation of things that happened yesterday or happened earlier in the day. And so to me, a forward-thinking platform would be one that takes the power of community, the power of gathering a significant audience at a single time, and would orient that toward improving the community, not informing the community of things it may already know about or not care that much about. This is obviously a somewhat self-serving idea, since it's what I'm trying to do in Philadelphia in a non-television context. But as somebody starting a for-profit entity, I'd say web only, the idea of a TV station doing this just seems like a much more natural extension, because you already have the audience, you already have the ability to convene, you already have personalities that people like and want to listen to, and the key is making that transition into how you cover it. The weakness in the plan is, as I said before, is this something that would be good for ratings? I think that's what broadcast entities are good at. They're figuring out how to take a lot of things that are not on their face, particularly earth-shattering, and turning them into interesting television. And in this case, education and development and homelessness and the environment, none of those things are necessarily on the face of it thrilling, exciting television from a visual standpoint. But I still believe that, again, in a very, very disaggregated world, television's ability to bring people together at one time in one place can be used to achieve a public good in a community, as opposed to the kinds of stories that most local television do today. Because I do believe, as time goes on, local television is going to have to find its own niche in terms of how to empower and improve a community. So thank you for listening. Sorry I talk way too fast. This didn't even make 5 minutes, but I figure with the Irish blather, I got 5 minutes worth of content into my 3 minutes and 55 seconds. Hope the conference is going well. Bye-bye.
All right, so thanks for making it this far. So for Jim Brady, I consider as a professor, this is a teachable moment. Use your phone horizontally for video. Okay, I wanted to give you a voice now. We've got a wrap-up panel, but we've had a lot of really pretty fascinating speakers. If anybody has questions, don't feel like you need to speak, but if you do, this is the time to do it. So is there anyone who wants to ask any of the panelists in the second session anything?
Or we can do the, go ahead.
Here. Thanks.
Is Ito still here? Yeah. So to me, one of the most fascinating parts of your project is the idea that you could just have a video running inside an app where you can display additional items. And I wonder, do you have any plans to license that further? I think that that's really, if NBC could be using that product, if the Jewish channel could be using that
Sure.
project. That'd be fascinating.
So just to clarify, it's not running in an app. When you upload it, it's HTML5. It works in a web browser, and it's just like a YouTube, and you can embed it in your channel. It's a free app. You can download it right now. It's just TouchCast. So yeah, that's the point, really. But then we would advertise against it. If you want to license it, like we did with the BBC, there are licensing structures to support that.
I have a really prosaic question. How much does it cost?
It's free.
It's free. Well, the gear. Okay, so I guess my question is the gear.
You can download the app and start creating with it. We have thousands of schoolrooms that have become television stations. Teachers, it's amazing what these 8-year-olds start TV stations. It's very natural for them. But we also have the BBC and the Wall Street Journal. It's the full spectrum of how you bring the web into the video.
Catch Barbara.
I have a question for the AJ Plus gentleman, and if Marcy is still here, maybe Marcy can speak to it as well, even though she didn't present. So, if you believe what you read on the media blogs, on the media blogs, the Al Jazeera TV network is finding that what it's been doing is becoming prohibitively expensive, the traditional model of gathering and producing news. And I'm just wondering whether any of the things that you've been working on might in some way be moved over to the cable side to, to make it, to not just get stuck in the old model, which is becoming apparently no longer sustainable.
So AJ Plus is completely independent from the rest of the network. So
Okay.
we're not looking at it as a commercially viable project. It is substantially cheaper, I can tell you that much. The cost of broadcast fees, one satellite truck is, we can produce a lot of videos out of that cost. We do see AJ Plus as kind of reinventing a lot of how we play in the digital space. So we've seen the rest of the network take a lot of cues from us. A lot of conversations are happening of how they can become more digitally able over time. The cost factor is still going to be there. I think, like, if you look at the viewership numbers in Al Jazeera English when it comes to breaking news being on the ground, they're still doing very well at this point. So it doesn't make sense to move over to digital completely. That's why we're creating new brands that can then bring the new audience over time. And yeah, the cost factor is there. But I think we're in a bit more of a fortunate position than other broadcasters when it comes to finance.
Another one or two? Okay. Oh, wait. Oh, okay. Hang on.
I'm Marcy McGinnis from Al Jazeera America. So in terms of the question that Barbara just asked, we have created a new cable network, and it is very much in the traditional model of news, all news. And but in our case, it is about the journalism. One of the things that I don't think we talked very much about here today was journalism. We talked about tools. We talked about ways to interact with people and other people in social media. But one of the things I don't think should get lost in this whole shuffle is the journalists that are out there finding the stories and reporting the stories that then you have something to talk about in your social media space. So, there has to be content created for people to converse about. And in most cases, it is the journalists that are out there finding those stories, reporting on those stories, telling us something we don't know. We have a motto at Al Jazeera America, which is basically, tell me something I don't know. We don't want our stories to be a regurgitation of everything that you've heard all the day before. So just in this moment, I just want to make sure that we don't forget in this graduate school of journalism that we are talking about journalism on television in terms of television news, and not just tools, and not just ways to consume it.
Jeff, there's a question here.
Yeah, this is addressed to
One quick second. Marcy, I think we will salute that flag, certainly. But let's also remember that journalism isn't just stories anymore. Journalism takes many forms. Those forms, as we've heard often today, do often emerge from new tools. So today's theme, yes, we're a school of journalism, so stipulated, Your Honor. But what we really want to see is how we can then find new opportunities. And so those opportunities come in phases. And I don't think it's bad to look at the tools and say, what could this do for journalism? How could this work? I don't think it's bad at all to listen to the public in new ways and say, how can we serve them better, that we can listen better? And the journalism will then come out of that, I believe.
I absolutely agree, 100%. I just didn't want it to get lost in, what we end up having the conversation about is the story.
I stipulated, yes, I agree.
We disagree.
I agree. Okay.
Yeah, ditto to what was just said by my colleague from Al Jazeera. I wanted to ask a question for those of you who are familiar with terrestrial radio, and that is, what ideas or innovations do people see nationally and internationally that are fusing television and terrestrial radio? When you look at conferences in Europe, talking about the internet, talking about digitization, they are thinking about these kind of questions. How do you make them synchronistic? How do you make them sort of a multimedia platform? And I'm just curious if people are aware or have any ideas about that kind of necessity to sort of fuse these technologies together.
I'll give you one small example. I'm on a podcast every week called This Week in Google from the Twit Network. Not exactly, it is what it is. But about, I think, roughly 10% of his audience watches live, is in a chat room and is interacting. And then the rest all do a time delay, and I think probably about half of the remainder listen as audio only. So video, if you think about it as you make it, TV can be radio at the same time. And you can reach your audience wherever the audience wants to be reached, and that's not a bad thing. So that's just one small idea. Time for one more, and then we move on to discussion. Anybody else? Yes, okay.
Here we go. So this isn't directed at any of the speakers in particular, but something that kind of seemed like it came up over and over again today was this kind of overwhelming call for hyper-local or hyper-personal news. There's this notion that was, I don't care about the fire that's a mile away from my house, but I might care if it's in my neighborhood. And it just seems to me like this hyper-local, hyper-personal can very quickly become hyper-partisan and hyper-insular. And so I guess if someone wants to speak to kind of the balance between finding a personalized news feed that's, news that's relevant to you, but also keeping this, in-depth reporting and being informed about the greater world around you.
Any of the presenters? Yep.
So when we talk about hyper-personal, it's about making it relatable to the audience. It's not just about what's happening in your immediate vicinity. We're a global news organization. How do you take stories that are happening halfway across the world in Iraq and make it interesting to what's happening here? An example of something we tested out with AJ Plus was, we know the VMA Music Awards are coming up. We always say we're never going to cover Justin Bieber, we're never going to cover entertainment news, but we knew there would be a conversation peg. And here you had Miley Cyrus, who went up and had a homeless person come and accept the award on her side. So the idea was, how do we make it relatable to the audience of people who are interested in Miley Cyrus? So we kicked off the piece with saying, Miley Cyrus did this, but we're not going to tell you about Miley Cyrus. Homelessness is an issue in the US, and then we went into the US homelessness issue. And that video performed ridiculously well in the ages 13 to 17 female group, with over 600,000 views, just because of the little 10 seconds at the top of it, making it relatable to the audience, which made it more personal. So when we talk about hyper-personal, is how do we get into these spaces of interest around people, and how do we make it relatable to them?
Relevance is the key word there, and making it more relevant. A real innovator in TV news storytelling, video news storytelling, Brian.
Hi, my name's Brian Storm. I'm from Media Storm, and I just wanted to share an idea that I had actually when I was working with John way back in the mid-'90s at MSNBC. And I was called crazy then, and I'm sure you'll think I'm crazy now. But the thing that always drives me insane about our business is that we're all covering the same story. When I was at MSNBC, we would cover Iraq, CNN would cover Iraq, like Al Jazeera is now covering Iraq. And I look at our profession and we have this limited amount of resource. We have limited human capital. So one idea I wish we would consider, and I know this is insane, but what if we actually collaborated instead of competed? What if we said, CNN, you take Afghanistan, NBC, you take Iraq, and if we really care about serving the public good, we could do a better job if we just collaborated together. There's limited human capital in our profession. No technology is going to save us, guys. We have to find a way to punch our way out of it. And stories matter. People need what we have. They want what we have. But we're all using our limited resources to go, really thin on things. Let's collaborate and go deep and work together to tell the story.
Amen. Do what you do best and link to the rest. Somebody I know said that. All I warned you that we would smash ideas at you. I know you're exhausted. We have one more panel, and I think an important discussion with folks who are in the industry. If those folks could come on up now, we'll talk about, do I need this? And we'll get the mic real quick. And then I saw the food go by, so we will have food. We will have drinks. Fear not. Rob, come on up. And let me say, Rob, I'm not a great sports fan. If you really did all those neat things you said you do, I'm a sports fan, because then I'll understand it better. I need to have a translator with me. So we have. Great, thank you. I'm so honored you wore a tie, Neil.
It goes with my business outfit.
Neil Shapiro from WNAT 13. And also NJTV, which is where we work together. Rahul Chopra from News Corp. Are you at News Corp level, right? In charge of global video. Yep. Julian March, who's fairly new to NBC, at NBC in charge of NBC Digital. And you've already met Rob King from ESPN. So, the end of the day, simple question for you guys. You guys have the money. You have the power. You have the means and mechanism. We didn't beat you up too bad today, I don't think. I don't think we beat up the old guys too badly. A little bit, yeah, a few scars. But what are, well, I guess first is, did you hear any ideas, hear anything today that resonated? And even just not specific ideas, but themes, anything at all, just jump balls, whatever. Neil, you want to?
Yeah, I thought, I think as Fred Allen has said that imitation is the sincerest form of television. So I think I heard some great ideas today, and I think you'll be seeing some of them soon on NJTV and art shows. I thought was interesting to me was being reminded that we can get out of our conventional ways of storytelling, and that as I watch other things, I won't even talk about my show, I watch Nightline sometimes, and I see they use graphics, they use smart ways to move the story along, that we don't need to be locked into that. And I thought that was very valuable. And I also thought that constantly finding ways to reach out to your audience and have them interact with you in all kinds of ways is something we can do more and better.
I think the biggest thing was, it's something that we've been talking about internally, at least for years, which is understanding and appreciating creating content for different mediums and different distribution models. Just not taking the same video and putting it on YouTube and putting it on mobile and expecting wondering why people aren't watching it. And the second thing is something, frankly, it's also just because I'm sitting next to Fred, but an appreciation and understanding of programming that I think is somewhat lost.
And the other thing, I mean, I think you were key in the acquisition of Storyful.
Yeah, I led the acquisition of Storyful. Michael Rosenblum is going to be hired by me as an ambassador for the brand. He just explained the value of Storyful.
Exactly, but Michael left out, Marcy, the thing that was missing from all his 1.4 billion, which is the journalistic confirmation side, and that's what Storyful brings on. So you're trying to find the value in all of that new witnessing that can occur, right?
Yes, exactly. I mean, it's harnessing the power of the crowd, but it's putting a journalistic layer on top of it to ensure that you verify that content, the authenticity of that content, and then and putting it in the hands of our partners to ensure that they can tell stories the way they do well. Simple.
Julian.
Three things: technology, artifice, and I can't remember what the third one is, but I'll get to it. But the notion that that television is built to serve the medium and the technology that it occupies, I thought was pretty incredible. Actually, what Rob said was fascinating. Was very similar to something that Clay Shirky said as well. My favourite mathematical equation, which is mass equals niche plus niche plus niche plus niche plus niche plus niche, which is a very digital concept. And so, by definition, if you're going for mass, by definition, you homogenise, basically, which I think is quite interesting. And then the other one is something that I'm obsessed with in my new role, which is change, basically, and I'm afraid, with all the dignity of a failed diplomat, I'm coming more and more to the conclusion that the only way to do it is to blow the whole place up, frankly. You know what I mean? And basically create something inside us which disrupts ourselves, because there are so many people out there trying to disrupt us already. I'd much rather that we did it ourselves, frankly.
Well, and your boss, Deborah Turness, got into a bit of a hot pot by basically saying people were, what was it, sleeping for the last 15 years? Was that it?
Yeah. Well, it was a piece of classic example of bad journalism, actually, because it isn't actually what she said. But funny, but actually, I wish you had said that. No, but if you read the comments to that article, there are so many people who actually agreed with her, really, and actually, sometimes you've just got to. I mean, I thought New Yorkers said it how it was, and
how do you motivate your staff then? The people who were there. I mean, maybe you blow it up. Maybe you get rid of them all. Maybe that's what you're saying. Or the people who were there have value. How do you motivate them for change? How do you protect them from the fear of change?
Yeah.
I mean, how are you thinking about doing that?
Okay, well, I mean, I've done that sort of stuff in both Sky News in the UK and ITV. So I kind of, and crossing, newsroom floors and going, media bisexual, if you want to put it in a weird way. But I haven't actually made a piece of television since 2006, as it goes. But I think you have to get people comfortable with the notion that the only constant is change, and the more you change, the more people get used to it, and that's really. Basically coming down to kind of importing what I would argue kind of digital values into television, and so if I just give you 2 secs here, television, big bang, destination, abject fear of failure, launch once, leave it for 10 years, what have you, digital is obsessed with utility rather than necessarily connection, distribution rather than destination, constant iteration, absolutely loving failure, eliminating failure by failing. Do you see what I mean? And I think we would do really well to sort of take a kind of, if you like, a product discipline into television. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, in fact, I was talking to somebody who was very, very smart at a certain publication around, who was talking about working with a very smart editor there who said that this editor doesn't think like product. It's not something we're used to because we had the product. Gutenberg gave it to us. It was done. It was done.
That's
It's finished.
exactly it. I mean, the problem is with television is that the pipes are already built, and they've been built for about is it 70 years or something? And all we're doing is stuffing new stuff down it. The great thing about digital media is you have to build the pipes too.
Rob, you really are innovating at ESPN. What else? How does that happen? A, and B, what else do you wish to do?
Well, to start with your original question, the thing that I liked most about today is that it seemed every presentation was focused on a means of serving an audience, or a means of serving an audience need. And it sounds trite, but the reason ESPN is where it is because we've, from the very first, decided we have a very simple mission, which is to serve sports fans wherever and whenever they want to consume sports. So that has taken us into a lot of different places over the 35 years that the company has been alive. And people forget, we were in the mobile business 10 years ago. We launched a phone, mobile ESPN. It was a disaster, right? But it was a great disaster because we realized we weren't in the phone business, we were in the content business. And so it gave us a sense of how to succeed in that space. Because our audience was telling us this, right? And so we've been in all of these bits and pieces and places. We've had as many as 33 apps. We're down to 13 because we spend a lot of time watching how our audience spends time with us. And look, we have an advantage. First of all, our audience only communicates in one of two ways. They either cheer or they boo. So you know where you are. There's no like quiet hum. And the second thing is that the world of sports largely lives on a calendar. So we're able to anticipate news and ways to serve people. And we can have conversations about what we see our audience doing, which then guides how we attack a Super Bowl or a college football playoff or a week like we just had this week. I mean, once I got done talking, I was watching Roger Goodell speak, and knowing that he had to speak took the pressure off of me today speaking. I was like, it's all be light and easy. But that's where ESPN spends a ton of time watching its audience, watching audience behavior. I was in newspapers for 20 years. We got ratings twice a year. We called it circulation. When I was in television, we got it every 15 minutes. When I was in digital, you get it every second, any second you want it. Now we've got the social space bringing new metrics into the space. And ultimately, we're all talking about what's the rating point at any particular second. And that really then guides you into how you should serve people.
As Sarah Bartlett mentioned this morning, we're starting, once we are approved by the state, I always have to say that, once approved by the state, we are starting a new degree here in social journalism. And that turns journalism on its head and says we have to listen to the public first before we make content, before we even decide that content is what the public needs to meet its goals, right? It strikes me that there's a skill set involved at ESPN. Because you're involved in sports, it's fun, it's okay.
It was. What's the last week?
Yeah, well, that's another question. That's a different question, yes. But generally, you know, the Jets suck, Jim Brady's a Jets fan. Is there a skill set that we can take into the rest of journalism from what you're doing in terms of new ways to listen to the public and try to understand what they want and need and think in terms of service to them?
Well, there's two things. The first is, if you're going to spend any time really looking at the metrics or looking at what research tells you, you have to accept the hard truths. So to the point of about journalism, which we value very, very much, we work very hard on bigger stories. We also know that on any given day, when we look at how people are using our digital space, Joe used to work there, 24 out of the top 25 pieces of content consumed are scoreboards or box scores.
Data.
They're not stories, okay?
Yeah.
And so what you have to understand is, in serving your audience, and this is true for us anyway, you got to find the right balance between the transaction that's expected when somebody turns you on or goes to your site, the transaction, and the ability then to inject into that transaction wonder, okay? That's the thing that we live in, transaction and wonder. Wonder for us is, who's going to win? Why did that happen? What's going to happen next? You know, what's going to happen next is very important to the people who are gamblers. But, you know, what's going to happen next? And you know, that, if you have that in balance with all the things you need to do to have a successful transaction, which is whether, how long is it going to take me to get home from work? You know, how close is this event to me? How can I take advantage of, you know, as long as you have that in balance, you're in good shape. But you have to accept that the transaction part of your work is as important as the wonder and the content and the fun.
All right, I started the day saying we weren't going to bash TV. Rosenblum did it for me, and that's fine. And I don't want to, but I think we do have to examine, as someone said earlier today, what the forces are that keep TV news from changing. We can salute the innovation flag all we want. We can say we want to change. We can say we have digital operations. But the orthodoxy of television hasn't changed. TV has changed, right? We've gone from the Brady Bunch to HBO, and we've gone from Gilligan's Island to Breaking Bad, and that's a huge advance, I think, in what we've done. But television news hasn't changed that much. Why? And what can we do about it? Anybody?
I'm just a be contrarian. I think television has changed more than we give it credit for.
Yep.
Right? And I don't want to. I remember when I was the age of some of the people out here, and I would sit at these things, and I'd watch people who now look like me, saying how much TV's changed, and I thought, come on. But as I've now lived that life, you know, it's changed in good ways and bad ways. But the fact is, there's more news on television than ever before. There's more different qualities than ever before. There's more opinion on television than ever before. You can get more things in quicker time on television than ever before. It was not so long ago in the Vietnam War, you were seeing stories 2 days old because you had to send it to Hong Kong and satellite here. You can now report, you know, you can have live rolling pictures on a tank rolling through Iraq. That's new. There's more investigative reporting on TV. Not enough of it, but more than there ever was before. So TV, if you look at TV in 1964 and look at it now, it's changed massively. Has it changed enough? Perhaps not. The more things we can do, perhaps not. But I do think more of it, better of it, in a lot of cases on the network side, I think better quality. On the local side, maybe not better quality, but certainly a lot more of it.
Well, let me push back a little bit. You still have the format of the anchor sitting there reading the news to you. You still have the teleprompter. You still have the same voice and cadence of it. Rare Australian accent added in. You know, you still have, it's still an orthodoxy, damn it. I mean, it is. And what happens to people, if you look at Moses Zeimer in Toronto at City TV, tried to break the formula, right? And I think he did a brilliant job for a while. And others then tried to copy that and kind of got it all wrong. What happens to somebody who tries to radically change? We've talked about changing radically in New Jersey. What's your fear? What's the worst that can happen? What are your colleagues going to say to you?
I think the biggest fear is that, you know, I think there's a grammar for a long time in a convention about some things that work. For instance, in drama, the normal convention is it takes actors and a stage. Maybe there's another way to do plays, but that's kind of what it takes, right? And I'm not the first one to say it. For generations, people watch other people, right? They don't watch buildings on television. They don't watch institutions. And if you say to people right now, what do you watch in the morning or the evening? They'll say, I watch Brian, or I watch, they won't say the trade name, they'll say the person. I watch Ted, whoever it is. So can you change it? Certainly. Is there a big fear that in the end of the day, people identify with that one person, and that if it weren't important, you know, I assume the reason they didn't make a change at Meet the Press for some arbitrary reason. They believe that one of the biggest successes, the biggest things in which that show works is the way in which you relate to the host, on both success and unsuccess. So to take that away from you as a tool and say, we're going to do it differently, is scary.
I'm not going to give you the secrets behind Meet the Press of today, I'm afraid, guys. Sorry about that. But that's for a few more drinks. But I want to sort of tell a story. It's really interesting to sort of track where, you know, kind of, I've been in 3 big newsrooms. Sky News in the UK, you know, hugely out there. ITV, which is a big UK commercial station, a bit like NBC, and then over here, which is kind of the US equivalent of ITV, NBC. And actually, our attitude to risk at Sky News was enormous. I will take the credit for inventing the news wall. You know, and we put people, you know, we sort of took people out of the desk. In fact, the first station I worked out, we actually had news on a Steadicam, standing up. Kirsty Young at 5 News in the UK. Look it up; it's on YouTube. But you know, but Sky was all about breaking conventions and all about challenging the status quo. And we weren't. And the reason we were sort of free, we were empowered to do that, and it was amazing. And that was, I think, because it didn't really matter how many viewers we got, frankly, because we were a kind of a marketing vehicle for B Sky B. You know, we were the piece of B Sky B which was seen in number 10 alongside the Simpsons when the Blair kids, you know, were young. And then ITV, you know, you work on a bigger audience and stuff, and you come here and it's a bigger audience, and you're basically paralyzed by fear. You're paralyzed by thinking, if I do anything, what's going to happen to that rating? And it's all about that 3-way race, kind of, or it's a 2-way race, really. You know, kind of rating battle, basically, which kind of means that they're very, very scared about making big changes.
Right, well, that's a business model problem, a clear business model problem of still going after mass.
Yeah.
Still going after reach and frequency, because that's where the business is. But we've heard a lot today about being personal and individual, and that's a very different business model.
That's the value of digital. Sorry, I think the answer to your first question is it's simple. It's money. The lower you try too much, audience goes away, advertiser dollars go away. Some of the fear. I can't answer some of these questions about TV news because I haven't watched TV news in about 4 years. I was at the Wall Street Journal before this role at News Corp, and I launched a product called WSHED Live, and their news offering, digital video offering. And the whole premise was there was a whole bunch of us sat around and said the model in cable news at the time is just not something that any of us care to watch anymore. So let's try and reinvent it from a digital perspective. The other reason is we've got some of the smartest journalists in the world. If we try and blow up the model and tell stories differently, and tell stories in the way that we've done so well in text, is it something that people will watch? And it didn't hurt that our advertising team could sell it at incredibly high CPMs. And now we have a business. I think that's part of, I have difficulty answering the digital.
But I still think it's true, isn't it, somewhat, and Adam Ellick may say this too, because we've talked about this. I think that those in newspapers who said, hey, shit, we can do video now, often emulated what they saw on TV.
But that's part of the problem is it's not just because you can create it doesn't mean you should create it. And the thing that people aren't answering internally when it comes to newspaper publishers is, am I holding video creation at the same standards I do for text creation? They're not. There's a lot of really bad content being created from newspaper publishers today. And until that changes, nobody from broadcast is going to really respect it.
Let me stay on, okay.
No, I just want to go back onto the sort of TV bit, because, you know, I think maybe one of the ideas there is the challenge that we face basically form, you know, the 51st floor, you know, figuratively and literally is that, you know, whatever you do.
He has a nice view, folks.
It's beautiful. It's very geometric, New York. It's beautiful. But the challenge we have is, you know, from the 51st floor is, you know, is OCF, you know, which is our word for profit and or acronym. And so the challenge is basically how do you maintain? It's like a cross between running a hedge fund and build. I think the secret to change is the combination of running a hedge fund and rebuilding a 747 from the inside in mid-flight. That's kind of, if we can get that right.
Right, so maybe what you should be doing is starting complete spin-offs.
Exactly. That's
that
exactly
don't have
what
a
I'm saying.
damn thing to do with you.
Exactly. So what we do, and then that's kind of what we've done. We're starting to do already. Breaking News is an amazing, actually now hyper-local, super fast breaking news app, which is amazing. We've got another couple of things in the pipeline. An amazing little news in form of a quiz, and we've also got a little startup which crowdsources streaming video from mobiles. But I think the secret then, and that's kind of where I see my job, is kind of the power of the insurgency, in a nice way, that is, by the way, where you basically just plant, some seeds, give them a little bit of, water and see how they go, and you run with the ones which work, and you just walk away from the ones which don't. I think that's maybe the way to do it.
Rob, you survived newspapers for 20 years and came here. What parallels and differences are you seeing in this process of change? Because newspapers started panicking almost 20 years ago.
Yeah, I don't know. I think, again, there's really something to be said for knowing your audience and paying attention to your audience. I can only speak for newsrooms that I was in. I really feel like a lot of our conversation was about ourselves and our internal organization, and not as much about our audience, which, again, to the point it was just made about change. That's what's changing. The audience is changing faster than we could ever have imagined. And when I made that whole statement about there not being a mass audience, and some people might say, oh, I don't know if that's true. All right, everybody in the room, hand your phone to the person next to you. You're not doing it. Because it's yours, it's your life, it's your persona. You've actually created a whole world of information around yourself. And sitting in a newspaper newsroom, we didn't know that was going to happen.
Yeah.
Who knew that was going to happen? We were going to give you something on your front doorstep at between 5 and 8 in the morning, depending on, the people who were driving the cars and how much gas they had. And then you would take it, whether or not it left smudges on your fingers. And you think of the other industries that were operating with the same model, movie theaters telling you got to get up, leave your house, go somewhere, sit in the dark for 3 hours with people you don't know and not say anything and do one thing. Record stores telling you got to come to their building, you got to buy a disc with 14 songs, you only want one of them, and you got to pay, $25. That didn't work out so well. And that's all just about audience expectation, right? And so, I tell this story all the time, I'm going to tell it one more time. I learned about audience expectation from my son. All right. So when my son was 3, my parents were doing a massive renovation project in their house because my grandmother's 101 years old. And 7 years ago, she moved in with my parents. And so they had to change the house in order to make sure it was possible to get around and for her to get around. So we couldn't visit for like 9 months. So when we finally visit, same thing happens, it always happens. My son runs into the house and he looks for my dad. And they go running off together. Only this time, they're running off together and there's this door my son has never seen before. He goes, what's that? My dad says, I'll tell you. So he opens up the door, and there's this gate. He pulls this gate aside, and they go into a little room. And he closes the door, and he closes the gate, pushes a button. The room shakes, opens the gate, opens the door. They're on the second floor of the house. My son's like, whoa. All right? For 3 days, up, down, up, down, up, down. At the end of 3 days, we drive back to Connecticut. It's late at night, we get home. It's time for bed. I'm saying, come here, Big Chief. I pick him up. I'm walking up the stairs. He goes, where's the elevator? All right? That's audience expectation. They see something one time, or they hear something one time, or they try your app one time, and if it doesn't work, they're bouncing, all right? Now, no newsroom, television, newspaper, or otherwise, could anticipate the rate at which our expectations change. But that's the world. And so, regardless of whether it's a newspaper or a television network, if we're not in that conversation about how people are changing, we're always going to be playing catch up.
We ended up with 4 male bosses up here. And so, Jenny, you talked about working with it. Mark talked earlier about working within a TV station, what he tries to get to change. No, we can't, we're too busy. Give your perspective about change at your level in a TV news organization and kind of react to what you've been hearing.
So, can I come up and stand there too
Sure.
to look at everyone?
Of course.
Thank you.
You want to sit here if you'd like. Wait a second, let's get a chair.
Have a seat.
No, you're totally fine. Your socks are amazing, by the way. I
Thank
feel
you,
like
thank you.
I got my pink toes. They sort of match your socks so well. Oh my gosh, I'm honored to be sitting with all of you here. So working in the TV station, I was extremely frustrated. I felt this community posting and wanting to be a part of the news. I'd look down at the tweets, breaking news, I'd have them right in front of me, and the anchors were 10 feet away from me saying to the viewers, call in, email us your reaction. And I'm like, guys, we have reaction right here. I'd have to wait till the commercial break to tell my producer that I'd found a great post. She'd then have to tell the graphics person who'd tell the director. The graphics person's screaming at her. She's screaming at me because she's trying to call and set up reporters. The director is now screaming at the graphics person because they have to recode everything. I'm like feeling terrible because I've just made everyone's life really miserable. They put up the wrong tweet. I'm like, that's not the tweet I wanted. Now I'm reading to the viewers and I'm trying to tell them through the TV to the director to change it to the next tweet. And now we're 3 minutes old and there's more tweets that I've seen that are even more relevant than what we're showing. It was a constant struggle, and so that's why I quit being on TV. I created an app, my dream app, to solve that problem called TV Interact. It allowed me to look down, press one button, and it formatted it for television graphics. It could airplay to the TV next to me. I could cut out all the people. So in live breaking news, I could create content. I could go through the tweets myself. I could go back and forth. My producer now could call and work out what is happening with this breaking news. The director could just sit back because I'm going through everything. And we started incorporating the viewers.
You had to leave to do that.
I had to leave to do that. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs or anyone who is CEO of a startup will realize you cannot be CEO of a startup if you have another job. I kicked and screamed, and I felt like I can be Jenny Hogan, the TV talent, and do this. I couldn't. So I had to leave to do that, and it was more important to me to help our industry move forward. I didn't know if it would benefit me, but I thought it'll benefit all of these people in here, these students.
Should your employer have invested in you?
So my employer was actually amazing. They just didn't understand. The way I describe it is the large media companies are barges going down a river the wrong way, knowing they have to turn around. I was on that barge, and the momentum is so hard. There's just meetings and things they have to do. They have fiscal years, all these things I'm learning now being on the outside. That's like, why can't you make a decision tomorrow and make it happen tomorrow? I feel like I'm in a kayak now outside of that barge, and I'm paddling the other way. I can make mistakes, and the barge can cut me off, or I can help that barge. And I feel like the broadcast companies, my bosses were amazing. They kept saying yes to me. They let me innovate. They let me try things on air.
But there was a limit.
But it's hard in a big organization. Yeah. So I feel like innovating with TV, you may need to jump or find people in kayaks and bring them onto your barge. And then if it's their fault, it doesn't work, cut them.
Okay, so Rahul may be buying you momentarily, or one of these guys might momentarily. You bought a company that was doing new and interesting things. What's the advantage of them now being inside the board?
Well, what I wanted to do with... There's
no Murdoch joke intended there, just corporate
please.
joke intended there.
Yeah.
Just to be clear.
I had to clear like by 5 people just to attend this panel.
I'm sorry, that was a corporate joke.
Yes, thank you. With video at News Corp, what I wanted to do from an acquisition perspective is to bring in people and create like the center of excellence. I can deploy people from Storyful to different offices and hopefully just spark change. We now have a journalist that's a Storyful journalist who's embedded in the Wall Street Journal newsroom. And not just with the video team, with the social team, with the US News team, with different divisions, trying to evoke change and an understanding of social and journalism. Just to your point, I put Storyful as a company across the street, so not in the News Corp building, just to keep them away from the mothership. And when the Storyful team watches me go into the News Corp building, they say it's like your entire demeanor changes. It's as if you've put on armor and you're entering Fight Club, because that's what it's like to work in a big company. But it's possible. I think like WSJ Live would never have happened if it wasn't for people like Alan Murray or Raju Narasetti. It's gravitating and finding the people and pushing for change. And if you can do it, the big companies, when you make that change, it's incredible what happens.
So you just heard Jenny with a great story of this. You're in the TV biz. That's the kind of functionality, and I'm sure you can understand the process that she described. Well, let's make a deal here today. Is that something you should buy?
I'm not going to buy it, but I've felt the pain. I know exactly what the pain is. You know, I mean, I remember sitting in the gallery on that horrible day, 9/11. Sorry, London bombings in 2005, when we realised that there were things on the explosions happening on the London Underground on the subway. And I said, let's get a map of the subway. We're just going to get it up there. Just get it up on the screen. You know. And it was like half an hour later. You know, what's going on? And I actually ran out into graphics. And there's a very conscientious young operator there changing the font of every single station. And in the end, we had to just get it up on a screen in the newsroom, point a camera at it, and then we telestrated it. It was the only way we could do it. So I feel the pain, you know, I really do. It's
and I want to say it's not about money, it's about impacting the industry.
Yeah.
So for me, I watch all these employees that I was in the trenches with. They've been in there for 30 plus years. These people bleed TV. They are viewer first. All of the people on the front lines are not in it because of the money, I can tell you that. They're in it because they're passionate about it. They're scared by change. They're probably their worst enemy, because when I come talking to them about an iPad app that cuts out everyone in that room, they're sitting in there thinking that I'm getting rid of their job. So the management have to deal with managing people through change to help their industry. But then I sit in with the managers and they're like, ratings are going down, revenues are going down. That's risking these people's jobs. So it really isn't about being bought by a company. It's about doing the right thing. And if we can create technology that can help these people that are so passionate get their stories out to the community, brands will jump on board. I don't think advertising's done right now. I think there is a way to do it right. And
okay, define that, please.
Sure. So my company, which I was at, let me be an entrepreneur within the company. So during it was CBS, during March Madness, they have airtime to fill. My boss came to me, he said, I'm gonna give you 30 minutes to do a show, whatever show you wanna do, just interact with your audience because you have such a great online audience. So we called it Social 7 because we're Channel 7, and I had 30 staff. I had a studio. I had whatever I wanted to do this show. We were not allowed to sell it. He said, just do the show that you'd want to do. So we did this show in Seattle. Immediately, or even a few minutes in, it trended nationally from Seattle. Had so much interaction from just that community. The next show, we tried another experiment a month later. They sold it with the station staff. I mean, we have 30 salespeople. We sold out. 8 brands bought it. Coffee stores, car stores, the typical local TV. I had to do 2-minute packages, 8 2-minute packages. It killed the show. The third show, they let me take over sales, and I sold it to national brands with a local focus. They're not getting a package. They're going to be incorporated into the content that helps the viewers. Target jumped on board, and we did a tweet up before the show started, teasing the content and asking the people what they wanted in it with Target Seattle's help. Target Seattle got trending because of this online. The viewers embraced them. They went up a lot. We had Microsoft sponsor it. They supplied a tech expert to teach us all about things with technology and how to make busy working people's lives more efficient. They did a segment on that. And then we had Invisalign for busy working moms. They did something too. I think M&M did something, and we incorporated that into the content. All of the sponsors, those 4, paid 4 times as much as the 8 to get the 2-minute package, and they bought 3 shows out.
Bravo. All right, let's go to the room. Who has questions, arguments, anything at all? Anyone? I know you're tired, you want to drink. Okay, good.
Hi. Many presenters talked about the user-generated contents, and it comes handy, especially for TV, since many of us have smartphones today and can take pictures and videos. What are the challenges to integrate the user-generated contents into your TV show or whatever shows you're doing?
I think some of it's just smart planning. You know, I can give an example of something we did around a college basketball game. We had the opportunity to think ahead as to what it was we wanted to do, and we actually asked the students as they walked in to send camera phone video to a certain address, and we used it in that night's highlight in SportsCenter. And there were several key moments in the game, and so you had the standard video, and then you saw it from the stands, right? But we had plenty of time to think ahead. I think what happens a lot of times is breaking news. There's great immediacy. It impacts a lot of folks. If you open the doorway, there's no real way to verify the content you're getting. Sometimes the speed of technology, the quality, can actually drag down the storytelling. And so you find yourself inviting a whole different editing process that may or may not aid with what you're trying to do in terms of serving your audience. So, but here's the thing, I mean, most of us have in our average year, wherever you are, events that are annual events that you plan for. There's a hurricane season. You have plenty of time to plan ahead for hurricane season. You have plenty of time to plan ahead for elections. And the question really becomes, what is the end product for the audience other than participating? What is the ability to enhance the storytelling, enhance the journalism, enhance the experience, in addition to letting people feel as though they can touch what you're doing? But that gets down to very specific planning.
Neil, you've been getting journalism students to give you video.
We worked a lot with students and the universities taking both their actual finished video and stuff they've sent us. We've also done things with our viewers where we've kind of turned traditional documentaries on their head. We once did Ken Burns did a big World War II epic. So instead of the normal way which we do things, which is the producers sit around and find the people they want to do and shoot them beautifully and write our own doc, we went in the air and said, we want to hear from you, so shoot your own stuff. Interview your friends, your parents, your grandparents, and send it to us. And we did a documentary, very much user-generated, and people were shot the wrong way, and the lighting wasn't good, and there were moments that I'm telling you were so unbelievably authentic, it did make a difference. And when a guy sits on his porch and says, I can look in the trees right now, and I know where the snipers are. 45 years later, I remember the sound of the bullets whizzing past my head, and I live with that every night. And it didn't make a difference, it wasn't shot well, it didn't make a difference, the sound wasn't perfect. That was a real moment.
Other questions? Saul, microphone.
Well, I'm interested in the question of live, right? You were inventing a new kind of newscast and you went on live. And I think an argument could be made that a lot of what people don't like about TV news, what we marathon through, comes from the linear live nature, because as somebody here was talking about, everybody has to watch the same thing at the same time, and not everybody's interested in the same thing at the same time. Talk about, if you would, do you think, and based on your experience, whether live is serving your audience, and does anybody else think that live is still valuable, or is it like essentially one of those gimmicks, like the stand-up in front of the thing that doesn't exist, that is pretending to add excitement without any reality behind it most of the time?
Okay, I've got to jump in here. I think live is fundamentally important.
Fundamentally what?
Important. Live is fundamentally important. Live is fundamentally important. Live, I love analogies, right? Unless you probably haven't worked this out yet, but here goes. The reason I practically got in, the reason I gave up history in order to do Russian at the age of 14, and I kind of regret that now, but I don't regret doing Russian, but getting back to journalism was kind of, I see journalism as being at the bow wave of the good ship history, another maritime analogy for you, because what you're doing, when you see a live camera of a camel running through Tahrir Square, or whatever else, it's happening live, it's happening now, it's immediate. This is, it's the now, it's history in a second's time. You cannot.
When it's live, yes.
Exactly.
But,
but no, I know what you're saying. Yes, but man in suit opining outside building. That's okay. It's only live because it's being brought to you, but it's not actually live. It's kind of replayed, isn't it? Do you see what I mean? And we're on this, and that's a problem with the nature of linear broadcasting, unfortunately, and that's why we are gifted with digital media. I mean, so do you see what I mean? It's kind of you can't if you look at, I don't know, CNBC's up there, for example, or, you know, any of the 24-hour channels, you know, the kind of running orders are done in hour blocks, you know. And basically it's just a means of sort of getting through the day until there's something new live to say. You know, my favorite production when I was in the control room was just hop from one live thing to the next, because that's, you know, that's kind of what 24-hour channels are meant to be for.
What we did, the philosophy behind what we tried to do was, with the journal, we wanted our audience to realize that we were live when they wanted us to be, in depth when we in depth when they needed us to be, everywhere.
Remember that PowerPoint slide.
I know, Jesus, everywhere and anywhere they were, right? So that was the everywhere and anywhere was the distribution model. We launched on 35 different platforms in 12 months. The live portion was, we did live shows, but there were clips that were available within 3 minutes after the live show was finished. So there was a portion of our audience every single day that first thing in the morning when they were riding in on the train, they were watching our show on their app, getting in. But there were some people that just watched the clips as soon as they were done on VOD. It also was a great way for us to just create additional inventory. So there are many different ways.
Because I think that in your case, Rahul, you were basically turning upside down the traditional TV model. So in the traditional TV model, you first have historically the live feed, and then off that feed, you then go ahead and create, you know, short pieces of content. In your case, I would presume the live was more like a factory to create VOD pieces of content, which I'm pretty sure represent the majority of your audience.
95% of the views were VOD, 5% were live.
Right. So that 5% was basically, you know, the foundation for all VOD. But
but the 5% was sold out at numbers that were pretty high. So it was nice to be able to do that.
But you know, I totally agree with what So said, and I think that, you know, one way to look at it is there any of those digital native publications who are doing live today? Is BuzzFeed doing live? Is Vox doing live? Is HuffPo? Yeah, right.
But HuffPo, let me talk about HuffPo for a second. HuffPo, and people laughed when Ariana sat down at the keyboard and they were wrong. She's amazing as an innovator. But HuffPost Live seems to me to be just trying to mimic TV, and they could have reinvented it. Does anybody disagree with me?
I just like to stand up for the viewer here too, because I love your passion about live. I'm so passionate, so I'm going to try to choose my words carefully about this, but I know the viewer, it just scares me to hear someone question live, because the viewer can get news live on their phones wherever they want. As a TV station giving content, we're a public service. We are trained to put the spotlight on the best news, and so we can save the viewer's time. We know how to find that best content, whether it's in a newspaper, whether it's on tweets, whether it's video. So utilizing social posts should be best content wins, and we should always be thinking about saving the viewer time. We know how to find that best content. There's so much noise for them. Are you kidding me? My poor mom trying to look through Twitter feeds and Facebook and work out what she's supposed to see. I can help her. I know I'm a trained journalist on how to isolate that best content. That's what we all do best, but sometimes we're discovering with the viewer. I remember when Michael Jackson passed away and I got hit up from everyone, is it true, is it true, is it true? They're seeing it on social media. We are the authority. I was discovering with them. I was being honest. Look, I'm not sure. Our assignment desk is doing this right now, just telling them through the process. If we'd waited and I'd gone silent for 20 minutes, that would not be doing them a service, because they're going to be scattering around trying to find everything. So I really believe news is live.
I think there's one little point though about kind of rolling news and live as well, because I think actually it's not really news in many respects. You know, it's also kind of very much like radio. It's kind of always on. It's the second screen in many respects. You know, having a rolling news channel up in the room. But I mean, some of our best ratings would have been from. That's dreadful, isn't it? Talking about ratings, but would have been you know, plane with an undercarriage problem coming into land at Orlando Airport, and you've got it right, you know, you've got it up there, and it's still, you know, on its final approach. You've got to stay on it, and it's a real grip. It's a gripping watch, and it lands. Okay, cool. We'll go on to the next thing. But that's kind of what
But
a
you're
lot
right,
of news
Julian,
channels
but
do.
that's not
and
news. That doesn't affect my life. That
But it's
doesn't
not
have any import. It's entertainment.
but still, it provides some kind of connect. It's kind of a bit of the wonder, what's going to happen.
Yeah, but as the consumer, it's like watching a train wreck. I remember when the Asiana airplane issue happened in California, CNN was reporting half of the stuff, what they were reading on Twitter, and half of it was wrong. And you're watching these guys report the news like this, like, oh my God, what is he going to say next?
Worse is MH370.
Oh,
worse is we don't know anything new, so we're going to keep on looping everything little we don't know and that has an impact, I think, on the value of news. And not I'm picking on Zucker all day. I don't mean to, but he said, no, we clearly did the right thing. Is look at the ratings, but then it fell off. And look at the numbers we got from Amy this morning. I think it has an impact on your credibility to say breaking news, breaking news, breaking news, and it's broken.
That's a separate question from live, if you ask me.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. That's
The issue around live, I believe, is that, and I know this because we just did some focus groups. You talk to a lot of people, they don't really distinguish between you're on live and there's something here for me that I'm interested in. They like that you're on live. They like it. They need you when there's a point of focus, a real point of, a point of interest. But if you weren't, they'd find something else elsewhere. One of the virtues of being live for us is something happens, a story gets broken by a competitor, and we have the brand connection with our audience, where they're going to turn to us and see whether or not we're talking about it, whether we know about it, our level of expertise and authority, and that's when internally it has a value. But again, most people think that the world is about them, right? So if you're not on, you don't exist, right? I mean, today at 3 o'clock, at 3:30, when Roger Goodell was on, everybody's watching. Live really mattered. But there are times, and we've all done this, we break in with a press conference because there's something actually to present in the live window. We essentially turn our network over to whomever stands at a podium. And 9 times out of 10, we know they're not going to say anything of substance.
That's how Chuck Schumer gets into office.
It just gives you the opportunity to, throw the live bug up. But the point that's being made here, that people got to hear is, today when we did the Goodell press conference, we were using the tweets of athletes as lower thirds because it was real-time context. So it wasn't just a matter of listening to one person talk. It was, how is the world interacting with this information? And we were actually sharing the notion that in this live moment, there's real-time context, real-time voice around this, which is actually meaningful to people. Because the other thing they're doing is they got a phone or they got a tablet on their lap, and they're looking for other people who either see this the same way they do or see it very differently. Again, this is a construct not of our making. This is an expectation of the audience.
But I think you guys are also, we don't talk about ESPN a lot within the news format, but you guys have also done this just incredibly well for so many years. I mean, the live format for ESPN, from a news perspective, albeit sports news, it just doesn't, it just feels like, it feels very natural. Where rolling news doesn't, it feels it's sometimes awkward.
See, I think that there are some live game, what we call live game window, roughly from about, first pitch, 7 o'clock, all the way through 2 o'clock in the morning when the West Coast games end. The live game window is very, very important, and everybody's diving in and checking stats and blah, blah, blah. But I think in the real world, there are live game windows that people kind of know about, but they're not really digging in hard enough. Like, like if you live in San Francisco and you're just trying to get across town, the live game window is from 4:15 until 8:15, when all you want to do is know, can I get home? Is the traffic going to suck? And there's like real transaction there to be shared. And maybe that's, and that's kind of why some local news programs are what they are. You got to deliver for people the thing that they need to know in that live moment that they can use.
My favorite example of this is yes, and so I no longer have to listen to the execrable NJ 1015 in New Jersey. I now have Waze.
Correct.
And Waze is an incredible platform that lets us all share data with each other.
Correct.
And Waze treats me, Google then treats me as an individual, and it knows where I live and where I work, and it helps me get there. My newspaper doesn't know where I live and where I work, doesn't give a shit, right? That's my favorite example. It's like your elevator example. I use it all the time. Yeah. It's a good story. But that's a key difference. So this idea that we had to that we could give traffic in 30 seconds for everybody in the New York metropolitan area is absurd, right?
Same as weather.
But that's where we get back to. That's where we get back to the importance of thinking about these ideas and developing them according to your brand. I mean, when you asked would we buy it? Well, we actually make stuff. Joe used to work with us. We make stuff. We find out that there's a need and we make stuff. We just built a beautiful new digital center with state-of-the-art studios for SportsCenter and our NFL coverage. And we didn't just do it to make television. We did it because we knew that we had to invest in the kind of content that moves across all platforms. So we have a big display unit, we call it the display unit, but it's really our graphics producers and motion control graphics. And everything they produce automatically goes into our app. All the full screen graphics go right into the app. And they're thinking at all times about, keeping a typographic and an information language that is consistent across platforms. And we fill the screens behind our talent, and our talent is moved forward. And the whole idea there is we want a one-to-one connection with our on-air talent, but we want information that is providing real context. We don't think of things like social or data analysis or fantasy as these silos. They're actually serving the modern fan, so they're language we have to speak, and we have to make sure that it exists in all places. And if we need to build something, we have a beta of our new website up. If we have to build something, we will build it together. One of the most important concepts we have isn't live or isn't news, it's now. Because that's the language that the audience is saying. Nobody's saying, geez, what's live now? Nobody's saying, what's news? They're saying, what's going on right now? And so for us, now is this central concept that's built into the website, that's built into the app experience, that is about just surfacing content that is happening in the moment, whether it's Instagram videos, Vine, tweets, what have you. It's not about Twitter, it's about now.
Can I just go back to one of the first things you asked? It was a very good question about why our legacy companies so slow to change. And I think your traffic example is a very good one. So if you're producing an early morning newscast, and for most local stations, that's now their biggest source of revenue. And the biggest thing people care about, two things they care about are weather and traffic when they get up. Two most important things. And it's true, there are faster and more individual ways that they could do it if they choose to. But right now, everybody knows, and you saw it today, there's a huge chunk of the audience who wants to make breakfast, get dressed, and they don't want to do that. They want to listen to TV and know what it is. And for now, if I were running the stations, you'd be crazy to say maybe over time there'll be less and less of those people. But right now, there are a lot of those people. And you want to keep serving them because the risk you take...
Yeah, but this is the mass problem. So,
Right.
so from a newspaper example, the Star-Ledger in New Jersey was one of the first papers to give up stock tables in 2001. And the fear was, in the old mass media metrics, all readers are equally valuable because we charge all advertisers for all readers, right? So you don't want to lose one old reader. Right. That's why you don't kill Beetle Bailey out of the paper, right? You don't do that. Well, so they killed the stock tables, they improved the business section, they saved a net on expenses of $1 million. How many subscribers left? I debate with them still what the number was, but at max it was a dozen, which means that we were spending $83,000 per reader who was soon to die anyway, because we had to hold on to them because we're presuming the old metrics. We got to rethink the business metrics here because our competitors online are. We're losing out on first-party data and knowing people as people.
I think Barbara was...
Okay, Barbara. Hit Barbara. No. You used to be a broadcaster. You know the importance of microphones, Barbara. Come on. And this is the last one.
Well, I want to pick up on Neil's point and push back a little with what you're saying,
You
Jeff,
always do.
because it's not an or. I think it's an and.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if what you really want to do is reinvent TV news or reinvent the TV news audience. And what I mean by that is that, as Neil says, whether we like it or not, there are millions of people who want to make breakfast and listen to a traffic report that's very generic as opposed to specific. And then there are the other people like you who go on Waze and you really want to interact and find the best way to work. It's not an or. So not only would it be silly to blow up the money machine, but all of these companies, Julian's company and everybody else's, are doing ands. They're building parallel tracks. But I don't really understand the adamance with which you want to blow up the one that is working still for a lot of people.
Okay, I'm not trying to kill it. I said I came here not to bury it.
Why do you even want to reinvent it if right now, for a number of reasons, it actually
I'll tell you exactly
works?
why. Because there are so many new opportunities to do things in new ways, and I don't see the experimentation with that form. Newspapers, as newspapers, to this day, many of them still say, that's where our cash is, we ain't changing it.
But they
And
were
what's happening
wrong.
to them?
But they were wrong.
Yeah.
And broadcasters are not currently wrong, and the arc,
Kurt, no, you
is
heard
not
Amy
that
this
short.
morning. You heard Amy this morning. The young people are going away. They're down from a half to
Yes,
a third
and so
in 6 years.
And so NBC News and everybody else, what they're doing is, right, there's two assembly lines. The assembly line that was building the big gas guzzler is still selling a lot of gas guzzlers, so they're not shutting down that line, but they're building Saturns over here.
That's fine, but
I think the point is they're selling
Fred.
less gas than they were before.
Fred wants to join in.
I'd like to say something to.
The Freds.
People do not watch the traffic report that has 6 highways on it out of a choice. They watch that traffic report because there's nothing else. I don't believe anybody's enjoying that traffic report, right? They would rather have an individual report that actually told them exactly how they're going to get to work in the morning and what their options are. And that, in a nutshell, is what is wrong with TV news, is that it chases a big mass audience without understanding the audience that they're talking to in the ways that can be understood now, because you can do what Jenny did and listen to Twitter. You can tap into the audience. You can have a conversation with the audience, and the audience that's going to leave the news and the gas guzzler metaphor is not the same thing, because this isn't a consumer choice. This is basically news. The responsibility of news is to give the most information to the most people when they need it, where they need it, and how they need it, right? And so that's the basic point here. And so much of news right now is basically there because that's how they had to do it 50 years ago.
But I guess I'm saying two things. One is, for the viewer who finds the 6-lane highway traffic report tedious, there is the off button. And
you can't believe that. You can't believe that, because the report is only a minute and a half long, and then they have to dump out of the show that they're watching.
So how would Channel 7 Eyewitness News in the morning give me
value?
My information? How would it give me my information?
You know what? It would tell you how to download Waze.
Yes. And then
Can I
give me
jump
real
in?
news. Fred, did you want to join in?
I'd
From
love
behind.
to say something. I was a traffic reporter for 6 years in the market.
We like you anyway.
I agree with you, and I agree with you. I hear everyone.
No, you can't.
No, I need to explain. And
platform world. Of course you can.
You may all stare at me like I got stares at when I was in my corporation trying to explain this to them, but maybe you'll understand. I feel like what half of you are saying is that imagine a box and we have an A, and we've put that A in and we're all trying to shine it as much as we can and pull it out. We're going to make it shiny. We're trying as hard as we can to make it shiny. These new viewers, it's never going to be shiny enough. We got to get a B and put it in that box.
That's the
B
and, not
might
the
be
or.
really
But
ugly.
no, Barbara, I still think that ask you this. Can TV news be better, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, so all we're trying to do is explore ways in which it can be better.
Can CUNY School of Journalism be better?
You bet your ass it can.
Yes. I mean, everything can be better, right? But I'm not sure. But I'm not sure that means that the current form of the J School or of TV news needs to have a bomb thrown in.
That's what challenge. Fred.
Jeff is not throwing a bomb.
He's not?
The people who are making TV news are throwing their own bombs, and their audience is dying every day. So to continue to go the way you've been going because you think there's an audience there is just spitting in the eye of the hurricane. It makes no sense. He's not blowing it up. The current trajectory is blowing itself up. And in fact, if everybody wants to not blow it up, they are crazy.
Well, over to Julian. But I guess what I'm saying is that for the time being, what I think most organizations are trying to do, legacy organizations, they're trying to turn the battleship in a bathtub. They're trying to reverse the barge going down the wrong way. But at the same time, not lose the benefits of it, and at the same time, also building a more nimble parallel track
A
of
revolution cannot hold the tide. We are in a revolution. We are going to flatten all the buildings before we build new ones. I'm sorry, you cannot manage this.
Oh well, okay. We got a barroom brawl before we got the bar open. This is good. Adam, you got the last point, I think.
No. Well, I I'm listening to
Speaking of battleships.
Page 36. I actually think this conversation has nothing to do with TV news or media. This is a debate over disruptive innovation. And this industry is being disrupted, and you're representing the incumbent legacy viewpoint that essentially says that it still works for some people. And it's glaringly obvious that it's a shrinking marketplace or viewership. And as soon as the bad content is good enough, it's going to take the market. So you can take that to the edge, and you can apply this to steel mills or whatever other industries you want. But there's nothing specific about this conversation that has to do with journalism or the media industry at large.
And it's organizational and cultural and business, too. I mean, I don't know who wrote the paragraphs in the Innovation Report in the Times. I just quoted them at length in a tome that's out November 6th called Geeks Burying Gifts about the future of news. I forgot I got to plug that. So I quoted at length, and the bravery of the report of saying, look at us, how much we are based around page one. And trying to question, one of the hardest things we have as teachers in a journalism school is the students come in here oftentimes wanting to emulate what they see when they're the ones who have to invent what's next. And so how do we teach them the eternal verities? How do we teach them these skills, which are all important? The inverted pyramid still has value, but how do we also tell them, experiment? And that's what this is. So this is my last question, and then we're going to go to the bar. This is the first time we've done this, and I want to ask you and you, real quickly, lightning round, is it worth doing? Don't suck up to us. And secondly, if it's worth continuing, what do you want us to do next? What would be valuable in this discussion? Anybody? Yeah, amen. Amen. I won't tell you some of the famous people who turned me down, but we'll get back to that. Yes, I screwed up. I don't use that as an excuse. I screwed up, yes. We know we like you guys, too.
I'd say more video, and I'd produce it tighter and more structured.
That's a TV guy talking.
Yeah, what if we did, we could, I thought it was fantastic and always good. We should, what if we did something which was actually like the video equivalent of a hack day?
Okay. Good. Okay, wait a second. That was one of the ideas I had was to take people over a weekend, give them equipment, and say, make stuff. It's a maker society. Make the stuff and make that the essence. So would that be worthwhile? What else?
Along those lines, one of the most interesting parts of the entire day were your students going around with their iPhones, with microphones, and they're using Filmic, and they're using, and it was awesome, right? So I would put the technology part of the thing first, and then talk about the media part. Because I think ultimately, technology is changing media, and so you throw into the discussion thing here, here's the technology you should know about. Here are the tools that are changing the industry, and then have the kind of media show ideas and the creative stuff.
Pass it on.
Did anyone under 25 speak today? I'm just wondering how any of us of a certain age are going to reinvent anything.
I love you, Fred. Thank you. He knows what to say.
Excellent point. Again, and one of the things I want to do coming up is get young people up there telling us about their media habits and shocking the shit out of all of us. So we're going to do that too, yes.
What about social responsibility? There was a guy named Thomas Jefferson who said the job of the media was to inform. We come from a state that 9% of the people turn out to vote. Talk about disconnect from journalism, from government, from everything. What role is the journalist playing in this state?
You should have come to our social journalism event last week, because that's exactly what we're talking about there. Okay, let me run around. Julian.
Well, I've got one more thought as well, which is I think we've talked a lot. I think we've talked a lot about storytelling. We've talked a lot about technologies, but I think we also should bring in the other element of the equation, which we seem to be ignoring, which is how do we actually make this a sustainable business? Yes. And I think, one of my pure constant frustrations is the fact that we're innovating, but where are the advertisers? We need the advertisers to come and innovate with us. Why is mobile not being monetized?
Or you need new ways to sell and new models and new metrics to sell.
Exactly. But that's the kind of thing we need to. Yeah.
I think it'd be an interesting ad to have some qualitative research from audience, something maybe your students could do as a lead up. So you've got quantitative from Pew, but let's add some, what are opinions, what are people really looking for, embrace the audience in that way.
Technology, audience, hackathon, visual and tighter, yeah. Okay, 2 more, and then we're going to go to the bar. I don't know if you want beer, but I do.
I'm hoping there will be some in-house collaboration, Gary Pierre and Errol Lewis. We need our local and ethnic media at the table.
Yes, agreed.
I'm not sure we talked very much about YouTube today, and there's 1 million channels, 1,000 content creators making over $100,000 at this point, and I think that that's where the niche news audience is probably going to grow.
Great. Well, I want to thank all of you. I want to thank Fusion. I want to thank Hal Strauss for doing incredible organizational work, and Travis and Bob, and thank you all very much.